You have a period of time where Mexico in the 60s was a hotbed for communist activity. You had a student revolt who were communist related, so they were shot and killed. There was a giant massacre there. The president that was in charge at that time turned out to be a CIA asset, and that creates a rift. That creates feeling within the populace that the government is not my friend. The border wall is being sold as a security feature to keep drugs out of the country. That's hilarious. Humans and people coming across that border pay their way through to some of these criminal organizations. And some of these criminal organizations actually make more money off people than drugs. I'll tell you a story. I grew up with this redheaded kid. From 16, he disappeared from my life. And all of a sudden, I find him again outside of a gas station. I'm working, and I'm pretending to not be involved with anything, walking past this gas station where there was a bunch of armed people. Somebody among the crowd that was there armed whistles to me, says my name, and my stomach drops to my balls. He's wearing chest rig, AK-47 magazines on there. He comes over, gives me a big hug, sticks some of these things in my What are you doing? I'm like, oh man, I'm just,
just passing through.
Just passing.
Hey guys, if you're not subscribed, please smash that subscribe button and hit that like button on the video. And if you don't have time to watch this episode right now, no problem, but I'd really appreciate it if you would save it to your watch later playlist. Finally, if you'd like to follow me on Instagram and X, those links are in my description below. Thank you. Well, Ed, it's great to have you here, man. I've been seeing you for years and years and years on every podcast. So my friends, Danny Jones, Mark Gagnon, obviously you've been on Joe Rogan and Lex Friedman and Sean Ryan as well. Really doing the Lord's work in a lot of ways, because you and I were just talking before camera, and it's like there are not a lot of people who can say that from a journalistic standpoint or anything related to it, basically go inside Mexico and go in and out and then come back and talk about graphically exactly what's happening on every level, from the cartels and the drug trade itself to what they're then doing at the border, which is all related to them as well. And it's like you're living to tell the tale, and I'm glad you are, but it's like, are you ever like afraid that...
Always.
I was going to say.
Always afraid, but it keeps you alive. I think more than fear, I feel the responsibility for a lot of the people that I grew up with, people that I met along the way, people who were struggling to do their own thing in the world. I was just in Jalisco and Monterrey. In Jalisco, I was in a place called Tala, and I drove around a bit and talked to people there about this looming threat of military intervention and how the cartels are reacting to these spy planes flying over the Pacific and all this type of stuff. And while I was there, you started hearing these rumblings of this mass grave being discovered. Over 200 bodies, apparently. Then in Monterrey, I talked to a guy who basically does the same work that I used to do, but he's doing it on the northeastern side of Mexico on the border, and he's facing drone attacks and IEDs. So a lot of this stuff is happening, and a lot of this stuff happens at a very localized level with people that go through this personally and directly, who have no access to reporters or platforms like yours or any sort of platforms on the U.S. side where they talk about some of this stuff. So on my end, I find it as it's almost a responsibility that I go down there and kind of bring light to some of these things. I was talking about this terrorist designation 5-6 years ago, and I was being laughed at.
Yes. I actually remember that. I think you talked about that the very first time you were on Joe Rogan.
Yeah. And here we are. And I guess the main thing, I'm from Tijuana, and I'm Mexican. I was born there, but I have roots in the U.S. now, and I can't help but look back and look at all the people like myself who went through this process, this initial part of the drug war that you don't hear about. I mean, we hear about the Ryan Terry Foundation, which is a Border Patrol agent who got shot and killed with some of those Fast and Furious guns.
Oh, yeah, the ones they were like the U.S. government was selling to them?
Yeah.
We can talk about that later.
Yeah.
Fucking nuts.
But you don't hear anything about Rodrigo and Armenta. You don't hear anything about their daughter who lost an arm being shot by some of those guns. These are people
The
that I work.
Mexican victims, yeah.
And there's hundreds of them.
Yeah.
There's a very weird one-sided narrative being taught and said online and in the media as far as this problem. It's like the U.S. saying there's a problem in Mexico, build a wall, and let's have all these problems stay over there.
Right.
But on the other side, you have Fast and the Furious. You have many Mexican presidents turning out to be CIA employed agents, and you have a foreign policy that U.S. has been instating in Mexico that has been horrible to the populace in Mexico.
Would you mind just explaining what you mean by the presidents literally being CIA employed?
There's been some uncovering of documents recently, the past 5-6 years. And people have realized that a lot of Mexican presidents in the 60s and the 70s turned out to be employed officials by the CIA.
Like paid assets?
Yeah,
or,
like paid assets. Several presidents of Mexico have been found out to be paid assets from the CIA. We're also living through this historic moment where Mexico has deported many in the cartel individuals, including a man who supposedly was responsible for the death of DEA agent Kiki Camarena.
They deported that guy?
Yeah, he's deported here.
Who was that guy?
Kiki Camarena supposedly uncovered a bunch of things in Guadalajara.
Right.
The name is escaping me right now. Oh God.
Most people out there are familiar, but
Yeah,
it was depicted in the show Narcos Mexico in 1986, DEA agent.
A bunch of head injuries. So
No, it's all good.
The name is escaping.
Basically, we deported this potential guy, though.
But the truth is that a lot of what happened in that time in the 80s, 70s, 80s in Mexico, the Contra affair was happening.
Yes.
And the U.S. was trying to figure out how to arm these rebel groups and get into a fight in Central America. But the U.S. was just getting off Vietnam, so they didn't want to spend any money on this and support this. But the U.S. was adamant about it. So a lot of these Contra rebels that were fighting in Central America were actually being trained in Mexico by the CIA, and a lot of the ways they were arming them was through funds produced by drug sales and basically cartel movements in this area. Kiki Camarena probably uncovered some of this. Probably.
He was a really good agent.
This is beyond my time there, but from the people that I've talked to who were around for this type of thing, this is what their opinion is.
Right.
And so it's the surrealness of being Mexican and also now being in the U.S. and seeing how both narratives are kind of being played out. The DEA has their man who killed Kiki Camarena, but on the Mexican side, the idea is the CIA killed Kiki Camarena. So who do you actually have?
Yeah, are you talking about Rafa Caro Quintero?
Yeah.
Okay.
Rafael Caro Quintero.
All right, because I was mixed up for a second.
Yeah.
When you said he was deported, I was thinking you were saying this was like an American citizen guy.
So
you think Rafa was paid by CIA?
They were all sent to the U.S. authorities. Right now, the U.S. is basically hanging a giant axe of tariffs over Mexico.
That's one way to put it.
The federal government in Mexico is at odds with the U.S. The federal government in Mexico is run by a lady named Claudia Sheinbaum, a part of the Morena party, which a lot of people see as the fourth transformation of Mexico. This different way of doing this anti-corruption party. But it's formed of every single member of other parties that just escaped ship and joined their party. She said that they discovered that a lot of these cartel guys were about to be released under the legal actions, which has happened in Mexico before, including Caro Quintero, who got released and just released by a judge and just disappeared into Mexico before he was subsequently arrested again. So she said that they were about to release a lot of these guys, which is completely bogus. I don't. Maybe one or two of them. So in an attempt to appease the U.S. and like really not have these tariffs come through, He sent original members of the Zetas, Caro Quintero, a bunch of these guys to the U.S. With realistically, this was basically an offering to Lord Trump in a lot of ways, you know. And then the tariffs actually, they said, well, you know what, no go, we're still going to do the tariffs, and now they're backing them down. So there's this weird back and push thing with the U.S. and Mexico right now. On the Trump side, these are people who are adamant about the Mexican government and the federal government's involvement in cartel activities. On the Mexican side, it's like the U.S. is also complicit in sending weaponry, having a giant consumer base, and responsibilities are being just tossed back and forth. And also corruption on the U.S. side. There has to be.
Oh, of course.
There has to be some of that. So
it's not one-sided.
So politics on both sides are pointing fingers at each other. And in the middle are us, citizenship. On the U.S. side, a giant generation of kids being eaten up by this fentanyl epidemic that some of it does come from Mexico, some of it comes from other places. And on the Mexican side, mass graves being discovered across the country. The war is very real. People march for Palestine in the U.S. or march for the Ukrainian wars or for Ukrainians. Meanwhile, on the southern border, there are thousands of people missing. Yeah. And when I say missing, I mean they're gone. Talking to somebody in Monterrey who was a part of some of these special operations, working in some of these cartels, he described to me this method of body disposal. And mind you, I lived through the Pozolero thing in Baja, where he was using caustic soda to get rid of bodies.
Caustic soda?
Caustic soda, yeah.
How does that even work?
It's a chemical mixture. You can get it all at Home Depot, and it's basically a homemade acid that you can dissolve bodies with.
Oh my God.
This was something that he said he learned from Israeli special forces guys that went to train some of the cartels on the border, right? Again, don't quote me on that. There's a bunch of books on this. That's in his testimony. That's what he said. Then I go to Monterrey recently, and I hear this method. I'd never heard about this method, but it's an interesting one. You heat up diesel fuel in a drum. And diesel won't burn, so it just gets really hot. And then you put the body in diesel fuel, and it will just cook and dissolve everything. He told me this method, and just imagining the nothing is left. Maybe some sort of dental prosthesis you might have, or some sort of I don't know, implant. But that's about it. Everything else gets gone.
All right, so we all know that cannabis has slowly started to become legalized across the United States, and obviously I just had Redman in here a few weeks ago who wants to expand some of the progression on that, but that said, we are getting to a point where you can enjoy cannabis in the comfort of your home without having to worry about it. Now, with that in mind, did you know that there's an online cannabis company that ships federally legal THC right to your door, and that this company has found a way to combine THC with carefully selected functional ingredients to target nearly every mood and health concern you can think of? If you're not familiar with this mystery company I'm talking about yet, I am talking about mood.com and their incredible line of functional gummies. And you're really in luck today because you can get 20% off your first order at mood.com using promo code Julian, Julian, at checkout. Forget one-size-all supplements that only get you high. Mood's functional gummies are optimized to kick in as little as 15 minutes and take you to the mood you're looking for. These moods can be everything from the Magic Mind gummies for deep work and creativity to the PMS support gummies to ease cramps and balance mood swings, or even the sexual euphoria gummies to help you feel ready for action and turn every touch into a full body experience. Listen, you can find gummies to just get you high pretty much anywhere else these days, but Mood's functional gummies combine premium federally legal THC with targeted botanicals to help you get into the perfect mood, usually in as little as 15 minutes. And everything ships discreetly right to your door. No dispensary lines, no awkward conversations, just better days and nights delivered straight to your doorstep. Best of all, not only is every mood product back with a 100-day satisfaction guarantee. But as I mentioned, listeners get 20% off their first order using code Julian at checkout at mood.com. Link in description below. So click that link, head on over there, find the functional gummy that matches exactly what you're looking for, and let Mood help you discover your perfect mood. And once again, don't forget to use code Julian at checkout to save 20% on your first order.
We are worried about conflicts that are going on overseas in the U.S., and there are mass graves being discovered all over the country that have been filled by some of these criminal organizations for decades now.
Who's in these graves, by and large?
Everything from, people that don't make it through recruitment, because some of these cartels are actually recruiting people by force. I'll give you the example of what's going on right now in Jalisco. They just found this training camp in Jalisco.
A cartel training camp.
A new generation cartel training camp. And I must mention new generation because they're a different entity, like a different type of cartel. Yeah. They've changed the game in a lot of ways. They took a page from the Zeta book. The Zetas were a bunch of ex-Mexican special forces who were sent to combat a certain cartel and ended up joining them. These are School of the Americas, Mexican, U.S. special forces trained individuals, high-level people. They took a lot of the guerrilla warfare manual that the U.S. implements across the globe and implemented in Mexico. So the videos that you start seeing of people getting hacked with a chainsaw or exploded in the middle of a field with dynamite and stuff like that started showing up from cartels. That came from U.S. propaganda training that some of these Zeta guys had. Which then inspired the ISIS videos that you see on film.
Yep. I remember those, yeah.
I just wanted to put that out there as far as because the U.S. has a responsibility here, and I just want to make that really clear as far as these entities in some way, shape, or form at a root have U.S. training or have some sort of U.S. involvement with their creation. The Zetas became what they became. A counter to that were these Mata Zeta groups, these tactical units set up in and around places like Sinaloa, where they were going after the Zetas. This is where the new generation cartel comes from. Yeah. It's a highly militarized, hyper-violent group of cartels. This is not the guys that have a tiger in their backyard rolling around the city with AKs in the back of a truck. There's some of that.
These are almost uniform type motherfuckers.
They just issued this warning against some of the Michoacan family to cartels that they're going to go to war with them, and you see them. There's a video of them out there right now. The new generation cartel issues a statement of war. It says, I think.
Oh, so a statement.
So interestingly enough, they're going to war with La Familia Michoacana in Michoacan. So again, if the U.S. feels no responsibility, all of our avocados and a lot of our that's where it comes from. So if you go to Chipotle,
I don't go to Chipotle, but I eat avocados every day.
Well, that means that we are responsible for a lot of this violence down there, because a lot of these avocado orchards are paying paid protection money to the cartels, and now they're fighting it out for this.
Yeah, because isn't it I didn't know much about this, but I think Kat Schultz was telling me, if my memory serves me right, avocado trees take a long time to grow. So if they're even destroyed at all, your whole business is fucked.
Yeah. So if you don't pay us extortion money, we'll burn your fucking field.
Jesus Christ.
The new generation cartel issued a threat of war against these families that control parts of Michoacan. These families these are cartel families, La Familia Michoacana.
Yeah.
They've been fighting with the federal government against the new generation cartel in drone and trench warfare in Michoacan for years now.
Trench warfare?
Trench warfare.
That's my next question was going to be, what does this warfare look like? Now you're kind of answering it.
Trenches, drones being sent over, dropping bomblets.
Oh my God.
IEDs being used to target military. There's a current petition by local authorities to a federal judge to hey, can you clear these mines out of the way? Because that's going on in Michoacan.
Oh my God.
I explained all this because they just found this mass grave in Jalisco, Auschwitz-like. It's being called the Mexican Auschwitz.
How big we talking?
It's a giant compound. It was utilized for training, is what they say. So people would be recruited forcefully. Hey, you want a security job? Yeah. Oh, come meet me here. Oh, hey, you want to work at this call center? Hey, come meet me here. and they were looking for, young individuals, basically. You get bussed over to this field somewhere, and then your instructors come out. And if you don't achieve the elements of the instruction that you're about to give, you get a shot in the head, or you get fed to the lions, is something one of the survivors said, that they had lions there. Or you would get disappeared. There's shoes everywhere on this place, and clothing. And again, if people want to know how serious the Mexican federal government is about any of this, that same farm was already raided by the federal forces
before the mass grave happened.
Before they found this mass grave, they just went there, found a bunch of guns, found some dudes, arrested them, and left. And they didn't do any investigation.
No smell, no nothing?
They didn't do any investigation.
Come on.
If that's what they say. Then these groups, there's several groups across the country of Madres Buscadoras, basically mothers of the disappeared. There's one in Jalisco who found, hey, there's bodies here. There's a ton of clothes, luggage, and pictures of people in this place. We should investigate. And that's what brought the attention of the media. There's a lot of shoes there, and people's shoes don't get taken usually unless their bodies are going to be disposed of. Yeah. And they don't burn the shoes because they create a lot of smoke, and a very big black pile of smoke coming out is probably going to be something that's kind of suspicious. So there's no calculations exactly how many bodies are there, but a lot of people died in that place. There's a letter that was found there. I don't remember all of the letter, but I just remember it said something about it if I don't come back, I hope you remember me, and I remember that I love you. Right? This just handwritten letter by this kid a
kid.
I mean, he was probably 19. Who under false he was just invited to this place for a job, right? There's been many of these cases across the country. Now we have the eye of the world right now because of what's going on in Mexico and the border and all this pressure, but this has been going on for years.
Yes.
It's only now that the horror of what this is has kind of seeped into the American populace as far as what the news and people speaking about some of these things.
Not enough, though, by the way. Not enough.
Not enough. I've been called a fearmonger or that I exaggerate some of the stuff that goes on in Mexico many times. And the amount of just death alone, 90%, if not more, of the homicides in Mexico are never solved.
90% or more.
90% or more.
Did they even try to solve them?
I was a state agent. And among many of my roles that I performed there, a lot of them I had to take custody of certain pieces of evidence or things that could be utilized for an investigation later on. And it was almost a running joke that a lot of the stuff that we secured or collected, I remember this one time we collected a lot of casings. They put them all in a bag, and the guy just laughs at it and grabs the bag casing and just throws it in this room, right, full of other casings. And you have to think about it this way. In one of the offices that I used to work with, the forensic service was probably 20 people. And at the height of the war in Tijuana, there was sometimes 12 bodies coming in a night. So I get it. It is an attempt to solve a criminal aspect when it's really a war fighting, insurgency.
Yes.
So it's just a very absurd government effort to try and solve issues in Mexico that are of a criminal base when you have a group like a Zetas, who are special forces trained individuals who then showed other people how they did their thing. And now you have a country that has whole sections of it being policed by cartel forces.
Yeah.
Or has whole elements of its political class be basically paid for by some of these cartel organizations. And people might consider that exaggerated or like, hey, no, this is propaganda. There's a reason why so many political candidates got assassinated and have been assassinated in Mexico in the past few decades. It's because these cartel organizations have politicized. So if you have a political candidate, you're my rival cartel. I'll kill your political candidate. so you don't have somebody in the government.
The government's just the pawns.
There's definitely something to be said about the governments being pawns, although I think it's much larger than that now.
How so?
It's long been known that the army, the Mexican army, and big parts of the Mexican political class, from governors to mayors to like presidents, have some sort of clear, direct involvement with some of these cartel organizations.
For sure.
For sure. The Sinaloa cartel being the biggest one. There is no way that you can have a figure like El Mayo Zambada, who was mysteriously picked up in Sinaloa and flown across the border.
Oh, we gonna talk about that.
There's no way you can have a figure like that operating for almost 40 years in Mexico without being arrested, without there being some sort of agreement on both sides of the border.
Yes.
To allow somebody like this to operate. And there's just no way. And they can't tell me that it's not true because I was a cop in Mexico and I was told to not go near places or not to go patrol certain spots or to let people go.
Do you think that was pure corruption or risk mitigation?
I think that's pretty pure. I think there was some high level corruptions, and now the former guy at the top of the agency that I was with is now in federal custody in the U.S.
No, he is.
Yeah, Luna. Luna was the head of public safety for the Calderon administration and a few other administrations before him.
Whoa. He
was showered with praise by U.S. authorities. He was showered with recognitions by the FBI as the super cop guy.
How'd that turn out?
I mean, while he was being showered with all these recognitions and all that, we were being put through FBI background checks, polygraph examinations, toxicological exams randomly.
Like the rank and file.
Yeah. I had people showing up at wherever I was living. People have show up in my house, government guys, and like, that's a new TV. Where'd you get that? Can you see how you paid for it? Because they were trying to keep us clean.
Yes.
Meanwhile, the guy that's in charge of all this shit he was dirty. Dirty as shit. So, like, I hope people can know why I'm so frustrated.
Yes.
With the amount of effort we made. And also the responsibility that the U.S. has with some of these situations going on in Mexico. The U.S. was the one that was supporting this guy during Luna during the Calderon administration.
When was that approximately?
That was the Felipe Calderon administration. That's that's 2013 era, okay. I guess. You have somebody that was supported and like fostered by the U.S. Government. And then this is around the time that Fast and the Furious happened.
Yeah, let's talk about that. For people out there who this was a little while ago now, can you just explain exactly what this was? Because every time I hear this, I'm like, I can't even believe that someone, let alone like the Attorney General of the United States, saw this on the desk and said, yeah, sounds good, I'll sign.
Yeah. And again, it's an example of I'm trying to provide you guys with a Mexican perspective of why people think that the U.S. is full of shit. Mm-hmm. Because it's something, and I get
truth to that,
and I get administration change, but we have to realize. I think it was a Project Wide Receiver. I think it was the project, the first name, and it started during the Bush administration, not the Obama administration. Mm-hmm. They were tracking straw purchases of small arms in the U.S. in places like Arizona and Texas and stuff like that. Where an individual will go in there and I'll buy an AK, I'll buy a 50 cal, I'll buy something, and then they would pile these and smuggle them to Mexico. The U.S. knew exactly who was buying, where they were buying it from. Some of these vendors would like contact the ATF, like, "Hey, dude, this is getting out of hand. Like, we were selling a shit ton of guns. Do you guys want to do something?" And they're like, "Nah, fuck. We need to track them." So they decided it was a good idea to allow all these ginormous straw purchases to happen walk them across the border, basically.
Deliver
them, and in some way, shape, or form, they were going to trace these where they went.
How'd that work out?
They started showing up shooting at us with those guns, and nobody warned us about any of this. Now, this is Eric Holder was the one that signed off on a lot of this, and obviously Obama, which is hilarious that you gave this guy a Peace Prize. Yeah. Like as Mexicans, like ha ha ha.
Yeah.
That's why that's a perspective that many of the citizens of Mexico have. Like, what's going on, right? But all these weapons started showing up in weird places. The only moment that I realized what was going on was by seeing it on CNN. Federal agents, U.S. federal agents in Mexico driving in this Suburban, they got shot up during a cartel-related incident. And it turned out that some of those guns being utilized in that incident were traced back to this operation Fast and the Furious. But meanwhile, a lot of these guns were being found in many places, including Tijuana. I found a few of them in a barrel buried in somebody's backyard, new in the box, 50 cals being found. This was around the time where armored vehicles started being utilized by cartel members because they realized it's probably a good idea to have armor. So we started using armor. They started using armor. So a way they figured out how to get through armor was 50 cals. So we started seeing them, FN-57 pistols. FN-57 pistols shoot a very high velocity pistol round. These pistol rounds will go through soft body armor. And we're Mexican, poor motherfuckers. We don't have plate armor like the U.S. And when we had plate armor, it's stuff we found in cartel houses and we put on ourselves. So one of my friends and his wife were shot with these guns outside of their house. They murdered my friend, who was somebody I work with, his wife, and his daughter lost an arm. She survived the attack, but she's no mom and no dad.
Prices over the last few years have been and continue to be high, and most people unfortunately have to reach for credit cards to cover bills. Credit card debt has reached an all-time high, and it's trapping Americans. But luckily, American Financing can help homeowners pay off high-interest debt by using their home's equity. American Financing is a family-owned mortgage lender that's been around for 25 years. And yes, they're licensed in all 50 states. Their mortgage consultants are salary-based, so there's no incentive for them to put you in a loan that doesn't make sense for you. Furthermore, their customers save an average of $800 a month. And American Financing doesn't charge any upfront or hidden fees to find out how much you can save either. You may be able to close in as fast as 10 days. And on top of that, you may be able to delay up to 2 mortgage payments, creating more savings upfront. American Financing has helped hundreds of thousands of homeowners create meaningful savings, and it's reflected in their reviews on Google. So make sure you call today at 888-991-9788. That's 888-991-9788 or AmericanFinancing.net/Dorey. That link is in the description below. American Financing, NMLS 182334.
This was done with guns that were allowed to walk across that border. And again, I'm pro Second Amendment.
Mm-hmm.
like I get it. But something in this operation is really, really off. And it's interesting that it only like a single cartel was armed specifically. The Sinaloa cartel specifically was the one that saw the benefit of this operation.
Why
at least on
that?
our end.
We don't know.
It seems to have been a favorite cartel of U.S. Government for years. I mean, you hear rumors and ramblings around when 9/11 happened, and again, this is something was before my time, but you would hear stuff like this, that when 9/11 happened, the U.S. didn't call the Mexican government to secure its northern border. It called the Sinaloa cartel. Like anything Arab, you should probably not, you should probably tell us about.
We have a record of this? They called the cartel?
We don't have a record of this, but this is something that's, spoken about in Mexico in certain circles. That when 9/11 happened, like all channels were open with Mexico, including the cartel channel. Yeah. So if anything Arabic was showing up on the border wall, or if anything, any smugglers were like dealing with any sort of Arabic people, they would tell just to say something about it.
Enemy of my enemy is my friend kind of deal.
And there's an Egyptian national who was arrested in Baja, and some people can look this up on some sort of arms charges, international arms charges. This was around that time, like post 9/11 era, and you know the rumor is that the cartel guys were like, "Hey, there's an Arab guy here. Like the U.S. told us to say something about it, so there he is." So there's some sort of relationship there. There has been a relationship there for years and decades. There's no way this organization could get to the size it has. This transnational, like the Sinaloa cartel, has dwarfed every other organization out there.
How big is it?
It's not that big anymore. I mean, the government has done a lot to destroy this organization, and they've
covering up evidence.
Who knows? I mean, you have El Mayo Zambada in U.S. custody. You had Mexico send 40 top cartel heads to the U.S. as an offering, and now you have El Mayo Zambada sending threatening lawyers to the federal government in Mexico, saying that if you don't release me, this is going to destabilize regional politics in Mexico. And the same lawyers that delivered this letter to the consulate are now being found pictured with all of the top ranking members of the federal government, including Claudia Sheinbaum, in the past 5 years. So there's a direct link. And people can call me like paranoid. Claudia Sheinbaum went on her press briefing saying, like, I've met a lot of people online. I've met a lot of people. I don't know who these people are. I didn't know that they were the lawyers of El Mayo Zambada, the biggest cartel in Mexico. But there's several pictures of her shaking hands and like being with some of these, and also some of these lawyers basically receiving recognitions for their whatever, basically.
And you believe it was very obvious to be able to find out who they were attached to?
I mean, yeah. And now it's even more obvious because they're trying to get him sent back to Mexico. And the government in Mexico is very adamant about that. They want him back.
Yeah.
I would want him back too, because I know what he, like, if what we assume he knows is true, he probably has a ledger of every single politician, government official on both sides of the border from the past 40 years.
You think he's got a dead man switch?
I would, if I was him.
All right, so let's talk about that. There's so much on the bone here, people. We're going to come back around to things. So we got Ed here for the day. We'll get to it. So I know you're thinking about different things out there. We'll come back to some stuff. But on the El Mayo thing, when this went down, I believe it was like last July, August.
Yeah.
He essentially, you have El Chapo's sons in custody in the United States. Allegedly, there's information coming from them that's involved in El Mayo being kidnapped to be put on this plane, flown to the U.S., where he's met by fucking 15 different U.S. agencies, taken into custody. And the difference with him, the way I understood it, please correct me if I'm wrong, is that like El Chapo was kind of the flashy, I'm showing you who I am celebrity kind of guy, whereas El Mayo was the quiet, like, I don't know, grandfatherly type back in the hills. I don't want to...
he's abuelo.
Right,
yeah.
right.
So
what do you think that was there? What's the story that's... Is the story being told far more shallow than it actually is?
So, like, what I'm gonna state, it comes from three sources.
Okay.
I have people that work in the special operations community in Mexico.
Okay.
I have friends who work in the new intelligence service in Mexico. This new federal police intelligence service in Mexico, who used to work with me, and now they're working at a high level there. And just people in Culiacan that didn't talk about some of this shit.
Mm-hmm.
El Mayo Zambada started his career in Los Angeles. So if you want to think about the Sinaloa cartel is actually probably the Los Angeles cartel. A dude married his sister, who was a former Castro era police officer that then disappears and then shows up in the U.S., right?
A dude married his sister who was former Castro. Okay.
Cuban.
That's loaded.
Cuban guy who was a former cop during the Castro days, then disappears and shows up in the U.S. Probably smells like CIA or some sort of like smells like that guy.
Where was he on November 22nd, 1963? That's what I want to know.
Who knows? Well, people can look this up, and like he's a mysterious character. But this is the man that teaches El Mayo the ways of the transnational movement. El Mayo Zambada, smart individual, goes back and starts this organization. A lot of us thinking back on El Chapo Guzman from the Sean Penn nonsense that happened and all that. I don't even get started on that guy, but all that shit that happened, we were sold by the U.S. government. We were sold this. It was El Chapo Guzman and Osama fucking bin Laden were on the top of the most wanted list. You would assume that this El Chapo Guzman was this giant kingpin that was in charge of the whole of the Sinaloa cartel. When he gets arrested, nothing happens. Realistically, it's business as usual. In fact, it grows. This organization actually grows after his arrest.
The first time he was arrested.
After his last arrest and extradition to the United States.
Okay.
Also, although he was arrested many times and escaped from prison many times.
Seen that video.
One of them was through some of the same people that made his drug tunnels on the border, went down and constructed this beautifully made tunnel. If you want to make a tunnel in a hurry underground, you have to shape it like this. This is like an arc with a point on it. Didn't it have like a motorcycle railroad track or something? Yeah. It had a motorcycle installed on a track. So as soon as he got down, he sped out of there. Again, I'm not El Chapo Guzman was a very smart man, but I think that his genius was in his
there he goes.
Yeah,
right there.
Yeah, he's
just pulled it up.
Yeah,
boop. Looks down.
All of the people that are in charge of that security in this place were all fucking arrested, including the director. I think he's still in prison.
They didn't do that. I feel like we never heard from Epstein's people when that went down. I don't know if we heard from these people again, but doop, 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 gone.
Yeah.
Right through the back of the shower.
Yeah, and also the fact that he was on the ground floor of that prison is completely suspect in my mind. But like, whatever. This is the last time he escaped from prison. The first time he escaped from prison, supposedly, they put him in a laundry cart.
Yes.
And that's all bullshit. He walked out of that prison. The government in uniform went in there, grabbed him, and walked him out of that prison. That's probably what happened.
Why do you say that's what happened?
Because the government down there at that time was extremely corrupt and their money could move mountains down there.
Yeah, but don't you think they would have at least made it look good? They say, all right, get in this laundry cart, buddy.
It was before cameras. So like they just got him out.
Cameras.
They just got him out.
Okay.
El Mayo Zambada during all this circus that's going on is quietly living in the mountains, controlling this vast empire of drug irrigation. He's an interesting character. Only appeared in a few interviews. I think his last interview was with a guy from a magazine in Mexico, Proceso. And I think he had another one that recently came out. But he was like kind of bothered by the fact that they would mention El Chapo in his interviews and stuff like that. He was like kind of shy about, or kind of like sore about the fact that Chapo was getting more coverage, I guess, in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
So he played it smart. He was quiet about things. Hard to pin down. Nobody knew where he was. He rolled around with like a squad of people.
What's the power sharing setup? Because like in the United States, we think about this, if we're looking on our end, we think like the 5 families and there's a boss and an underboss and whatever, but it's not like that with the cartels.
Like back when it was, again, a functioning federation, like again, the Sinaloa cartel, I think is on its way to a full extinction. It was a federation, families controlling territories, having some sort of alliance. We're not going to fuck with each other. We're going to band together and fight other people. And El Mayo Zambada seemed to have the Vito Corleone type strategy of investing in people, investing in political careers, investing in businesses on both sides of the border, So he played it cool. He played it quiet. Favors here, favors there. El Mayo Zambada was the one that actually negotiated the release of El Chapo Guzman's sons when they were abducted by the head of the New Generation Cartel, El Mencho.
When was this?
Oh, this is like a while back, probably 9 years ago, 10 years ago. They some of El Chapo Guzman's sons ventured into New Generation Cartel territory and were abducted in mass. Supposedly, El Mayo Zambada was the one that negotiated this directly with the head of the New Generation Cartel. So again, this is a very astute individual who has this level. And I think around that time is when you start seeing a split in these families, I guess. You have the remnants of El Chapo, his sons, now taking care of business in Culiacan.
How many sons does he have total? Do we know?
I'm at the top of my head. I don't know exactly how many, but there's a few. There's a few wives, a few girlfriends. There's some twins that are living in the United States right now with Emma. So there's a lot of them.
Oh, right, the kid. Yeah.
There's a lot of them. Right now, the one on the top of the list is Archivaldo. Archivaldo is the last remaining son of El Chapo Guzman who was actually actively in control and moving things around down in Culiacan, the capital city of Sinaloa. It's their last bastion of control, basically. I don't think he's in Culiacan, probably. He's probably somewhere else, probably maybe even in another country right now hiding. I would. But he's basically at the top of the most wanted list, both by the Americans and by the Mexican government right now.
How do you call the shots in such a violent world living in another country?
Having lieutenants on the ground that you trust directly who are on the payroll.
How can you really trust them, though?
There's no really, I guess. But we just saw the mass arrest of 4 of his top lieutenants in Culiacan by Mexican Special Operations. They found a tunnel in the houses that they were hiding in, by the way, Barrion, that led right into the sewer system. Very, very Chapo-esque. But you see these organizations and the way they operate in places like Culiacan. So, and the abduction of El Mayo Zambada is like key. So if people want to uncover this, like exactly what's going on, El Mayo Zambada is asked to participate in this political meeting. There's a guy that runs a university, and the governor of Sinaloa have a dispute, and he's asking El Mayo to kind of like, hey, can you mediate this?
Yeah.
El Mayo Zambada is compadre. It's a compadre, basically. He's the godfather of one of the sons, or like some sort of like familiar relationship there. So he says, yeah, I have to go to kind of solve this issue. So he shows up to this ranch. And it's not that, the person that he was there to help out gets shot. He says this in this letter that he writes about his abduction, and then he gets probably blindfolded and gagged and they put zip ties on him, and he gets hurried onto a plane. The guy that was shot in that meeting, Nemesio Cuen, the Sinaloa State Prosecutor's Office says that he was shot at a gas station, and they produced this video of him being shot at a gas station, which didn't happen. But they produced this video and said, oh, he was shot at this gas station. No, it's like a video of somebody getting shot at a gas station.
And they just said it was him.
Yeah.
Okay.
So basically they're lying about his murder.
Yeah.
So that means the Mexican government is trying to cover up some shit there, maybe. But not the Mexican government, the local government, the state level government. So the state level governor says that I wasn't there for that meeting. I went to the U.S. He wasn't in the U.S. He's probably somewhere in that meeting. He's a Morena party candidate, so he's part of the federal ruling party. So there's some shame there. And supposedly one of El Chapo Guzman's sons organized all this, accompanies El Mayo on a plane that flies into the U.S. And the rest is kind of history. To me, it has all the indications of a U.S. covert operation on foreign soil. But we could maybe one of El Chapo Guzman's lowest experienced sons organized all of this and pulled it off. I don't know.
Hey guys, if you haven't already subscribed, please hit that subscribe button. It's a huge, huge help. Thank you. Could have been. It could have been a mix of both. Like he's helping with it, but they also want it. My question would be, why would the United States covert operators turn on a guy who hypothetically here they've been working with for decades, who knows where all the bodies are buried, and bring him back very publicly? This isn't like they.
Yeah.
Why not just kill him right there? And let it die with him. Like they brought him back, and now he's going through the whole trial thing, and he can make threats like this. Like, oh, I know where shit is. Why would they let that happen?
I don't know. I think there's something to be said about the age of some of these overt cartels coming to an end. I think there's something to be said about the age of information, and a lot of people now tuning into this as an issue and problem. Like I used to be on the fringes of social media talking about some of this shit.
It's crazy.
Now it's front and center.
Thanks to you, though. By the way,
I've tried to figure out what the intention is as far as why now, and the only thing that comes to mind is one, the fact that this fentanyl epidemic has reached all of us in a very direct way. Yes. Do you know anybody who has died of fentanyl overdose?
My friend died last year.
I meet them a lot, and I will just say this one. It makes me kind of emotional because I know the guy. A friend of mine who is a beautiful, beautiful guy, beautiful man, fucking volunteers for like at-risk youth people and stuff like that. Who's this person who was a heroin addict himself in the past. His son, 14, got dosed with something at a party. And he didn't wake up.
14.
This is almost 2 years ago. His room is exactly the same way. Now that's one of 1,000. So I imagine that the U.S. is like, you know what? Whatever this is, whatever we're trying to figure out, or whatever policies, like twisted policies were around this shit, we need to maybe do something about it now. I think this is going to be the next war on terror.
Yeah.
And when I say the next war on terror, I mean, this is going to be the next big issue that's going to be in front of people. So let's figure out how to start it in a big way. There's a narrative there going on, and I don't know exactly what the narrative is. I do know that this happened before the Trump administration came into power. So people trying to pin it on Trump are kind of mistaken or a bit vague on that.
Yeah, it's too early to say stuff on that yet.
But I do think that in a lot of ways, Trump is some sort of weird catalyst for change. I'm not saying he's a positive or negative figure. I do know he's an outsider in a lot of ways. The way he's been utilizing those tariffs and the pressure behind them, and just the fact that he's adamant about the Mexican government being involved in all this, despite all the pleasantries between both governments, he's like, "But I know you guys are in on it." Mm-hmm. It's refreshing to hear that because it is something that is plainly true to most Mexicans. But I guess as far as a perspective shift that I'm trying to put out there for people, all of us are complicit in the U.S. as well. The policies that the U.S. has implemented abroad have greatly fostered some of the situation that is now exploding in Mexico, and a lot of these mass graves, a lot of the...
Why? Like, what do you mean by that?
The U.S.'s hunger for some of these drugs. I mean, I was in Portland. I was telling you about this Portland experience where I was seeing federally issued syringes being filled with Sinaloa cartel heroin for
Crazy.
people. If we watch Netflix series, I mean, if you think about it, if I went to a winery that was run by Al Qaeda and then did like some product promotional for their bottles of wine, you know, and said, "Hey, buy this Al Qaeda wine that benefits this organization. They're pretty cool." I mean, I'd be supporting terrorism.
That's
and
right.
There could be some... Netflix has a bunch of series on some of these people, and a lot of life rights have been paid for. There's a lot of tequila bottles on the aisles that Americans buy. I'm not going to name the brands, but people can research it themselves, who are owned by cartel organizations. You have you have people, popular musicians, showing up on MTV and singing to Lady Gaga and shit like that on the VMAs, who are clearly Sinaloa cartel funded and supported. And where's the outrage there that we saw post 9/11 when this designation came in? So there's a weird, it's a weird
double standard.
It's a weird double standard where it's like these cartel group organizations are now terrorist organizations, but somehow when they cross the border, they're all down in Mexico. Like, when's the last time you heard about a major U.S.-based figurehead being arrested related to drug distributions?
Couldn't tell you.
Isn't that a weird thing?
Yes, it's weird. We started this entire part of the conversation with you talking about the kind of the disconnect between how people in Mexico view this versus how a lot of it is like ignored or considered a problem, as you just said, down there, as they say here. And you are such a unique person to talk about this because you have skin in the game on both sides of the border. You're from there. You go there all the time. It breaks your heart to see what goes on. You've already mentioned some stories, and you have way more of people you know who've been caught in the middle of this and killed, their family maimed. You know, it's personal in every way. And yet, you know, we take it seriously here now because we have problems. But we're not looking at it through the same lens, to your point, as we do when we look at, you know, radical Islamic terrorism and shit like that.
Sharia law coming to the U.S.
Right. But there's something, and this is just a thought I've had in my head long before you were here, just because of some of the people I talk to and things I hear. But there's some sort of odd attitude that has existed until now where I think the government, the United States government, has always viewed the cartels as a net resource instead of a net threat. And here's what I mean by that, because that's a crazy statement to say, but here's how I'll back it up.
It's not that crazy.
It's not that crazy in a way, but like when you think about it, like imagine people who are supposed to be representing your government that's, you know, the modicum of the free world making decisions like this in the back office. What I mean is, when we had radical Islamic terrorism or something, they were pointing to buildings that fell down here. You know, images that just shocked people and like, holy shit, 3,000 people died. The cartel stuff would happen down there, and the effects that would happen here would be anecdotal. Oh, Johnny died of an overdose.
Yeah. Media blackout.
That's right. So it would be, what was the old Stalin quote? It's like, one death is a tragedy, you know, 1,000 is a statistic or something. It was almost like the opposite of that in a way, because the statistics were drug use. It wasn't people in the media didn't say cartel funded drug use. So we created this attitude that could have been pushed by people in the bureaucracy to kind of say like that's a separate problem. And the reason I'm saying this is because I've seen it up close myself as to how the government has used the cartel as a resource. I had Matthew Hedger sitting in that seat for the second time the other day. And I like Matt a lot. You know, he was doing what his job was, but he was a knock. And he ended up infiltrating the cartels for many years, where he was a money launderer for them. And his job was for them to continue to exist so that the CIA could do what? Could use the access he would get to take care of CIA-related national security threat shit around the world. And I say that when I also know this guy, Matt, lost his brother to narcotics, and he takes it very personally.
Yeah.
And yet he had to live in that world. To go a step farther with that, there's another guy who was talking to me about coming on the podcast some months ago. We may do it at some point, who's like fucking 75 years old. He says he's not in the CIA, but he's a part of this organization with like 3-4 ex-covert guys. And, you know, magically every time they show up in some fucking country, you know, the government's toppled 6 months later. So do with that what you will. But he came into the CIA as a knock for 15 to 20 years in the cartels, where they literally recruited him and said, oh no, we don't want you to stop what they're doing. We want you to go be a part of it. You see, this is something that's in the 70s.
Yeah.
So I see a pattern forever where the United States has said, they may say like, the cartels are very bad. These guys suck. We don't like it. But this bad, and the access we can get is not as bad as this bad that we actually need to stop.
Yeah. Yeah. That's, I mean, again, this whole rat's nest that is being uncovered now. And, you know, I get it. People are asking for the Kennedy files. Man, ask for the Mexico files. I know there's a lot of them. People are asking for disclosure on UFOs and stuff like that. And ask for disclosure on fucking wide receiver, on Eric Holder and his involvement in some of these operations, putting guns and weaponry into the hands of a very specific cartel, basically doing a destabilizing military act against Mexico. Yeah. You have a period of time where Mexico, you know, in the 60s, Mexico was a hotbed for communist activity. You had a student revolt in Mexico in the 60s, in Tlatelolco, who were communist related. So they were shot and killed. There was a giant massacre there. The president that was in charge at that time turned out to be a CIA asset.
Oh, that's nice.
So there is probably some sort of call being made there to allow these soldiers to basically go live fire with some of these protesters back in the 70s. And that creates a rift. That creates generational trauma. That creates a feeling within the populace that the government is not my friend. And whoever these guys with AK-47s are in patrolling my town, who are probably more of an authority figure to me because they're right here, they could be more of my friends. So it leads to this societal shift in Mexico where like people want to talk about where corruption comes from. It's easy. Corruption comes from the local populace saying the government is no fucking good. Let me figure out how to just pay my way through, pay other people that are not the government to pay my way through, or figure out ways around shit. Corruption is like cultural in the system. And the saying that I always go back to, Mexico has this a single saying about the United States. Mexico, so far from God, but close to the United States. Yes, there is a responsibility by Mexicans. And I'm like, I was born there. I realized that there is a responsibility by the Mexican government, by some of the citizenry that supports some of these organizations or that defends them, or by some of the people that listen to some of this cartel music and they want to grow up to be like that. And, you know, family dissolution, there's a shit ton of responsibility to go all around. Mm-hmm. But a big part of that responsibility lies here in the U.S. And we have to talk about that. You know, it's pretty easy to point fingers and say, like, build a wall to keep all this unsafe things to come here. The wall is only going to inhibit the it's only going to stop the elderly and the people who are not able-bodied. Like I just came down from the border and I saw a group of like 20 people make it across, right?
Over a walled part of the border?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
was it a wall with an open door?
No. There's ladders. There's there's ladders. The Customs and Border Protection guys still have a manpower issue.
Yeah.
And the last time they put the military on the border during the migrant caravans, I think a few of them were arrested for smuggling people up.
Oh, that's nice.
So, like, again, the whole aspect of corruption.
Yeah.
Perspective-wise, the border wall is being sold as a security feature to keep drugs out of the country. That's hilarious because the border wall has been up in a lot of the places where most of the drugs go across that border. So that's pretty funny. Human smuggling and people coming across that border pay their way through to some of these criminal organizations. And some of these criminal organizations actually make more money off people than drugs. And continuously. Again, one of the mind-blowing aspects of, you know, this American experience that I was talking to you guys about, as far as like me coming up here and like traveling around and figuring things out, you hear a lot of talk about slavery here in the United States, the history of slavery here in the U.S. There is slavery going on right now.
How so?
Some people can't pay for the crossing, so they work their way.
Like indentured servitude in a way. Yeah, which is slavery.
Yeah, and sexual slavery as well. Like I've been in some weird fucking hotel rooms in the Midwest that would fucking freak you out.
In our Midwest, that involve people that came across the border.
That involve children. Yeah,
children.
I mean, I don't know. 13-year-olds for me is a kid.
Of course, it's a kid.
Yeah.
You're talking that they were.
Yeah, during the Biden administration, many people that came across that border had a very specific little wristband on their wrist that meant that they were to be used. So a lot of unaccompanied minors made it across that border, were taken to hotels and moved around. And that's another aspect of it that doesn't really get talked about.
No.
Some people, and mind you, I'll bring this a little bit back. I've worked with a few law enforcement agencies as an advisor. They sent me stuff. I give them an opinion. I've trained some of them as well.
You work with a bunch of them. Yeah.
You name them, I've worked with them.
Yeah.
But there was this whole thing about trafficking that came out. Like, this movie came out and everybody was like against trafficking, and they were like fighting against all these. And the thing that made me boil in my blood with all this shit is that these guys were doing operations outside of the U.S. to mitigate trafficking. The biggest consumer of trafficking victims is the U.S. And a lot of these kids that were being put across the border, unaccompanied minors, a lot of them were being, utilized and are still being utilized as ways of paying their crossing.
Are their parents aware of that? Because no.
I mean, these are kids that were just alone, unaccompanied minors coming across Mexico, being handed over by somebody that knew what they were doing. And, would it make you suspicious if you saw two 20-year-old dudes showing up in a van picking up a 13-year-old kid?
Yes.
That's why they use ladies for this.
That would make me suspicious, though, too.
Two ladies, older age, working with some of these criminal organizations, putting the 2 or 3 kids in the back of a car, take them to a hotel, staying in a hotel long term, dudes coming in and out servicing. Like that, this shit happens.
And they pay off the hotel, obviously.
This shit happens, right? And that's just one side of it. It might be minor, maybe, but it's huge in the effects to some of these kids.
No, it's what, I'm sick about it, but like it doesn't. But it doesn't surprise me.
But the mindset is this. Again, we saw all these movies about like overseas and then other countries, sexual tourism. All that shit is true, but the main consumer is right here. And this shit happens here too. So I was like, where are all the local raids of these, hotels and places like this where some of these services are happening? Also, where are the raids on some of these, on some of these places where some of these kids are being handed over to strangers? I mean, these kids were being handed over to strangers with some paperwork, and you would see them at the airport.
Yeah, no, you're taking the words out of my mouth.
So like, I get the whole aspect of the U.S. being horrified by shit that's going on overseas. I'm not from here. I want to be like, I'm now committed to being from here because I have to fucking do my whole immigration process. But man, we talk about the horrors of the war in the Ukraine. Like, what about the horrors here? There's some shit happening here, like some dark, twisted shit at high levels. We went through the COVID epidemic, and you can't find toilet paper, but you can find produce, right? And I traveled around. I flew on like 2 or 3 commercial empty flights, like I did. COVID. Yeah, during COVID, because I had to fucking work.
Yeah.
And you know what I always encountered when I was staying in hotels? Clean rooms at hotels. And the ladies were always not speaking that clear English, So like, how can it be that we are all screaming for, the border wall, send them back, deport them. But during COVID, these were the people that were essential to work in life,
Yeah.
How can we have somebody like Governor Newsom, speak about the current policies that are, in place, while he has a winery full of people that are paying off their ability to cross that border.
Oh, so he literally has people working there who are indentured.
I don't know. Like they're everywhere, right? People who are trying to pay off their time here. I get it. I understand. There's a reason why illegal immigration is illegal.
Yep.
And it has nothing to do with the laws of this country. Has everything to do with the need and addiction that this country has to cheap, off the books labor and other things that are much, much darker.
Much darker.
Now, I'm an immigrant myself. Like, I went through it legally, and it is a shit show.
Yes.
And I get it. Like, I'm not a, I didn't support any of both of those. I think we could do much better than both of the candidates we had on the ballot last election cycle.
Agreed.
But I understand. I get the frustration. I get the punishment that is being issued by the voting populace. But I think we should really look at ourselves, our society, what we're doing, and what our responsibility is. I mean, I'm not talking about reparations or like none of that shit. I'm just talking about, hey, it's like realize the U.S. and Mexico are tied at the hip. Number one. It's a number one trading partner of the United States.
Yep.
If the U.S. decides to follow the advice of all the commenters online and just send drone strikes to finish off the cartels in Mexico, the only thing you're going to do is turn these cartels into insurgencies.
That's right.
Because that's what's going to happen probably.
That's right.
You send a Predator drone down to Culiacan and explode a house that has some family members in there. Now the government is going to turn to its citizenship and say, yeah, the U.S. made a mistake. No, they're going to say, the U.S. attacked us.
That's right.
And these criminal organizations, well, they're actually freedom fighters now. And like the local populace is going to be on their side. They already are in a lot of ways. They're already, the cartels have been doing hearts and minds for decades, right? When COVID hit, they were the one enforcing the mask mandates down there.
The cartels were?
Yeah. When COVID hit, the cartels were enforcing mask mandates. If you didn't wear a mask in parts of Culiacan, you would get a board. No, they would get you. They wouldn't kill you. They would take a board, pull your pants down, and slap you in the ass with this fucking paddle. When people were locked in, the cartels were the ones in certain parts of Mexico actually giving out these bags of basic staples. For people.
How does forcing people to mask win hearts and minds? Though? I feel like that would be kind of the opposite.
I don't know. It was like a thing. They were basically in any place where they operate, they try to be the government. And again, if you have these criminal organizations acting as governments in the places where they operate, but also they have the shadow parts of themselves here in the U.S., which is again media blackout, which is. Traditional media in the U.S., fuck, man. It's shady.
It's bad.
It's shady.
Yeah.
And as somebody from Mexico that was working at a time when Fast and Furious was happening, the amount of things that weren't said about that, for example, like in the media, was like, fuck.
Because they have the people on there talking who are supporting the fucking operation.
This is what we're now learning, and this is what we've now realized with this revolution of people just not being a part of the traditional media. There's something shady about all of that. Realistically, there's something shady about just the media blackout with all of the shit happening in Mexico from the time that I was active to. You're seeing a break of it now. People are talking about killing fields and mass graves like it's a new thing. This has been happening for
going on
decades. Again, I was around for the Pozolero incident in Mexico in Tijuana.
What was that?
A guy they called the stew maker, who used to use caustic soda to disappear bodies. This is way back. This is way back. So that's been happening for decades now. So there's nothing new about this. And the media just being completely silent and quiet about it is suspicious.
Yeah.
Right? It's very suspicious. I don't know. We're entering into an age where you're seeing the probable and possible extinction of the Sinaloa cartel, for example.
Yeah, let's come back to this because that's obviously a huge statement to a lot of people out there. What is this strictly because of the vacuum that's happened since El Mayo?
For some reason, the U.S. federal government has decided that El Chapo Guzman and all of his sons are public enemy number one in Mexico. So they're just concentrating their efforts on them. And you are seeing an embattled Chapo Guzman family trying to maintain control of its of Culiacan as its kind of like power center. And meanwhile, a lot of the factions that supported it and a lot of the factions that used to be with it are now turned on them because of the betrayal that they experienced.
Yeah.
And the Mexican federal forces are specifically, that's who they're going after, right? Because there's tariffs involved, there's politics involved. And again, I don't buy into Mexican federal efforts right now actually trying to eliminate this problem.
Why would you? They've always been corrupt.
They've always been corrupt, but people need to just factor this in. Claudia Sheinbaum, current president, massive security overhaul, going after some of these cartels, new police being invented and new names being put to them. This political figure of Harfouche, who was the head of the police for Mexico Mexico City when she was a leader there, coming into power, and now him being at the forefront of this of all these anti-cartel operations. But before that, there was a time where the federal policy was abrazos no balazos, bullets, hugs not bullets, right? Which was led by the political leader of this movement that is now in control of all of Mexico, Andrés Manuel López Obrador, who, among other things, went to the hometown of El Chapo Guzman 6 times during his tenure as president. La Tuna produces nothing, but cartel members, but some of the most famous cartel members of the past few decades. He is seen talking to El Chapo Guzman's lawyer and mother during political campaigns and rallies. But again, the whole denial of the current federal administration is that there's no relationship, right? So you have a whole presidency where it was basically hands off. That was the policy, hands off. And now you have this administration who is like, we need to figure this shit out now.
Yeah.
Like we need to undo all of what just happened. In Mexico, there's 2 factions. One, the loyalists, who are Claudia Sheinbaum, Morena. They are the change we need. They're uncorruptible. They're like the responsibilities of all the past political parties. The PRI, the PAN, the PRIAN, all of them are trying to tear down our candidate, our president, Claudia. And then there are people like me who realize that most of the people that are in that party used to belong to other fucking parties.
Yes.
And I was in high level politics for a bit myself as a security individual. Like I headed up the security of a governor for a while in Baja.
Was he on the right side or the wrong side?
His time will tell. I didn't get to see anything shady. They tried to kill him a lot.
That's interesting.
That's why they sent us to take care of him. So his whole security staff was apparently corrupted, and it was a whole shit show. But I got to see all the political faces and names, and now I see them all under this new banner, right? Because they're all Morena. They're all somehow clean now. And it's a farce. It's a farce. You see, and every now and then I post some of these videos on my Instagram account, which is shadow banned as hell, but I still post them, of federal forces saying hi to the cartel guys and kind of moving off, or not being actively trying to get at them, but they're like, shaking hands and just there's this farce going on all over the country where, some cartel members are being targeted, but other ones are completely being left alone. You have on one end an embattled Chapiza Chapo Guzman cartel being dismantled in Culiacan, but on the other end, you have a new generation cartel posting a video where they're issuing war statements against the Familia Michoacana, and there's just about like dozens of these heavily tacked out cartel members basically issuing a statement of war against La Familia Michoacana. Which
how old is the new era cartel?
It's probably 15 years old, somewhere around that.
How did it form?
They created this organization. They created this group called Los Matacetas. Los Matacetas were basically a counter to the Zeta cartel, who was expanding across Mexico. So they wanted to form a unit or a group that could fight them. And I think what they got right, and they were basically mirroring the Zetas. Interestingly enough, like I'm going to talk a little bit about the Zetas because I recently learned some information about them. I was just in Jalisco like a month ago. I interviewed a guy, Gafe is his moniker on YouTube. He's like a prolific YouTuber in Mexico, but he was a part of one of the most elite units in Mexico, those Gafes.
Okay.
They are our Delta Force, I guess. That would be an equivalent. I mean, these guys, high-level people. The narrative that we have now is that the Zetas were a group of special forces operators from Mexico that went AWOL and joined cartels, joined a cartel organization, the Gulf Cartel, as bodyguards. That's the narrative that we have now. Well, according to him and a few people that I've talked to now, they were actually sent on government orders as an investigative police arm to the Gulf of Mexico. And they got issued, like, these are your orders, you're working for this guy now. And that guy was the head of the Gulf Cartel. So
the government, the military, orders them to go in and says basically your military commander when you get there is the head of the Gulf Cartel.
Yeah, you're going to be this is going to be who you're working with. So these are smart people. I mean, the amount of training these guys had, and also the selection process. People want to talk about buds and the SEAL selection process being like this very difficult thing. Gafe described his process taking 3 years of actual military service and then almost 2 years of a process to create a Gafe. Whoa. And we're talking about third world special forces training. I mean, this is not, you're not going to get waterboarded with a towel.
They're not checking your vitals.
This is brutal training. And then he explains what they showed them. It's a Green Beret like unit. I mean, they're talking about augmenting forces by training the locals. They're talking about media propaganda. They're talking about psychological warfare. They're talking about explosives, ordnance, sabotage. They're talking about taking control of local populations. They're talking about
this is espionage training.
This is taking down government type level training.
Yeah,
and this is the U.S. was directly responsible for the creation of some of these groups.
How do we know that?
School of the Americas. There's some pictures of some of these Zeta people. I've heard. I've never seen them, but there's pictures of some of them in Fort Bragg. So these guys were people that were trained. So you have these units, these groups of that level, and they go into basically, say, bodyguarding positions with the head of the Gulf Cartel, and all the while they're just taking notes.
Yeah,
because they're smart.
Yes,
they're not. So they're taking notes and they're figuring out. We can probably do this ourselves. The Zetas changed everything in Mexico. When I mean everything, cartel related. Things before the Zetas were, there were shootouts. There were like gang wars and shit like that. The Zetas implemented armored vehicles or artisanal armored vehicles for the first time. The Zetas implemented IED technology and explosives to some of these events. Not the first ones, but the ones that did the more sophisticated.
So now they're putting IEDs all over Mexico.
Yeah, there's IEDs currently in Michoacan, and local populace is actually issuing the government to try and get them out. I just talked to a guy who is in Monterrey who's working in some of the operations groups. IEDs and drones dropping bomblets on them is a common thing now. So the Zeta, what I want to state is the Zeta cartel changed the game and upped the violence to a level that Mexico had never seen.
How much pushback did they get from existing cartels
A
from
lot.
like a war perspective
A
to
lot.
try to stop them?
The Sinaloa cartel and like a few of the other cartels were like, "Fuck this! These guys are fucking gonna take over." They would go into a town and just recruit locally, which is, if you think about it, brilliant, because they would take all of these kids who didn't have opportunities, and then people like myself. Because some of the people that actually trained me were more members of the GAFE, so they were actually this type of individuals. So they would take a bunch of them, put them through the same training process, or in a lot of ways that they went through. You want to talk about like scary, like psychological shit. I mean, take a kid in his like 19, 20, just like I was, put him through some hardcore training, where you have to like witness somebody getting shot or shoot somebody yourself to prove loyalty, sleep in the middle of nowhere, fucking eat garbage, kill a dog, eat the dog's meat in front of your trainer, then get involved in shooting and tactics and movement and operations and patrolling, and then see that you have a very specialized, this kid can shoot, so give him a rifle with glass, and that kid can drive, so give him a wheel. So you start getting them responsive. You start getting very sophisticated cells of cartel operators going into a town and just fucking wiping the floor with their rivals, because their rivals are just kids with AKs.
Yes.
No training.
And they're psychologically brainwashing them, though. What you're describing is clear methods to get people to lose sight of their own autonomy and who they are.
Well, we can call the military brainwashing as well in that regard, but that's exactly what they went through. I mean, when I went through my training, it was the same people were involved in my training. Not the Zetas, but like people that came from the institution that produced the Zetas, GAFES. The breaking down of the human.
Yes,
so they can pull out or create the individual that they want to use. This artificial sociopath, right? Which is, again, we talk about the military, but that's who they started producing. So this phenomenon grew in Mexico.
Across the whole country.
Across northern Mexico. We saw some activities in Baja from these guys as well. This fucking surgical prison break that they did in Tijuana. They dressed as ambulance drivers. The movie level shit. So what they did was they basically upped the game. 50 caliber armored vehicles, precision shooting, rocket launchers, man pads were kind of put into the game as well. So they basically turned into an insurgency cartel. Basically, that's what they were. So they changed the game. And again, I'm not going to point names. I'm not going to say this is directly responsibility of the U.S., but the U.S. has a long track record of training its own enemies.
Oh, yeah.
So
again, it comes back to that whole argument where they're like, all right, this enemy's worse than that enemy, so fuck it, we'll take that L. Yeah. That's what they decide, and they use Mexico. It's very clear across every level. They use Mexico as a dumping ground for that.
I remember watching Rambo 3. You remember Rambo 3? Yeah. It's like a Taliban or just a bunch of like freedom fighters, and then but then they're not anymore.
Then they're not. They were the Mujahideen back then, right?
So yeah. A lot of the same phenomenon has happened in Mexico, I guess.
Yes.
These guys are our allies, and now they're not. We've seen the U.S. use, for example, the Mexican Marines. For a while, the Mexican Marines were utilized by the United States as a point of contact, and they would utilize them to do operations against cartels. Operation Black Swan, which went after El Chapo Guzman in his final moments of freedom, was run by the Mexican Marines. But the federal Mexican government saw this when they changed political parties and said, like, you know what? We're not going to use you guys anymore because you are compromised by the U.S. So let's use the Mexican army instead. That's why you start seeing...
Who's compromised by the cartels?
The Marines are compromised by the U.S.
Yeah, the Marines are compromised by the U.S., but the Mexican army is compromised by the cartels.
It's compromised by a more old and linear... And again, I'm not just speaking out of my ass when I say that the Mexican army is compromised by cartels. People can look up something called the Guacamaya leaks, which is our version. Guacamaya leaks was a giant leak of Mexican army documents.
It's like the Pentagon Papers, kind of.
Yeah. And in these documents, there's like conversations about, hey, the governor in this state works for this cartel, so let's, or this military region favors this cartel over here, but this military so they're speaking openly about.
Yeah, we have it pulled up here on the screen. So military surveilled Ayotzinapa school for years before disappearance of 43 students. Intelligence reports reveal constant exchange of messages during night of attacks in Iguala. Mexican military continues to deny investigators complete access to archives.
This is in relation to a bunch of students that went missing in Mexico.
Oh, there it is. Yeah, what you were talking about, the Mexican military's current use of the Israeli surveillance platform
Pegasus. Yeah, Pegasus.
Wait, they're using Pegasus?
Pegasus has been implemented. I have experience with this. Pegasus has been implemented in Mexico for years now. The Israelis have a really strange presence in Mexico, as far as trading, as far as politics.
They have a strange presence everywhere.
As far as cartel activity, there's been some high-level cartel assassinations with Israeli individuals involved in Mexico. So, yeah, they're around. There was a time in the early 2000s where they were like the it people for security in Mexico. So if I'm a security agency and I need high-level anti-terrorist training, the U.S. wouldn't send people because they're afraid to bring people down. So the Israelis would come. So a lot of
like the Israeli government sponsored, or like companies like Black Cube.
People would say people that came from Israeli government that are now presenting themselves as contractors.
Like Black Cube. Yeah.
Yeah.
Whoa.
Which again, I'm not saying anything. I don't know, but I imagine that there is some shady shit going on.
You
there.
Just did, so
I mean, these are just
his hands up like Trusky, like don't worry about me.
I'm not Kanye West or anything like that. But
I wasn't gonna accuse you of that.
but there's definitely Mexico is this crossroads of a place. I mean,
yes,
you find just so people can understand how complex of a crossroads it is, as far as like an inspiration for warfare. The Zetas, or who they used to be, learned how to use propaganda warfare from Americans. So Americans showed Mexican special forces how to use propaganda warfare to psychologically damage their enemy from the U.S. The Zetas, the Mexican special forces guy turned into the Zetas. The Zetas start implementing torture videos of people getting hacked in half with a chainsaw or fucking horrible shit. And these videos start showing up online. A lot of Americans' first interactions with the cartels online were these videos. And these videos were being seen by the Middle East. Mm-hmm. So we can draw a clear line from the U.S. showing how to use terror videos to the Mexican army, to the Zetas, to ISIS, like the inspiration of this process. And also you can see the IEDs and a lot of the weird mortars and explosives we're finding all over Mexico are traced back to people that are coming back as people are coming back with experience from the Middle East,
right?
Americans with military training and experience who are then like, I don't want to work at a fucking 7-Eleven. Let me go to Mexico.
Sell my IDs.
Sell my experience and my IDs.
IP. Yeah.
There's some people online talking about high-level special forces individuals training people in places like Jalisco. Like I've been down there and talked to a lot of people down there. I don't see that. I don't think there's a Delta Force guy down there training anybody, but I think there are probably a few Americans that have some sort of military background and experience, at least in Jalisco, doing tactics and training, explosive and ordnance type training
for
cartels. So again, we have this feeling that a lot of things that happen in Mexico are just somehow just originate in Mexico.
No,
a lot of them are originating in the United States and the influence of the United States into Mexico. And again, ideas come from all over the place. Israelis, and again, this is from the stew maker of Pozolero's statement. Israelis showed elements of the Arellano Felix cartel in Tijuana how to get rid of bodies. right?
This is years ago.
This is years ago.
Yeah.
So that is a foreign entity or a foreign group basically showing tradecraft to Mexican criminal organizations. Then you start seeing IEDs and bomblets of a very specific type. And again, I have interactions and I share information with people, including some people in the U.S. Army who every now and then IEDs and explosive related stuff like it gets sent to me, and I'm like, I just like check this out. A lot of the know-how for some of these IEDs and a lot of the know-how, just the skill set, especially with some of these IEDs that are showing up in the northwestern part of Mexico. These IEDs have a very specific trigger set up, a plunger from a syringe. So these plastic plungers from a syringe. So these these mines are actually plastic. A lot of them are actually mostly made of plastic with a very small amount of metal in them.
They're that delicate then.
Yeah, there's these things you can buy. And we're like, that's a curious style. That's not something you'll see. We don't have ordnance laying around all over the place like Iraq or Afghanistan. So they're utilizing mining level explosives or some homemade stuff. That actually comes from Colombia. So at some point, the Colombian FARC units and forces hired a bunch of IRA members.
Like the IRA in Ireland?
Yeah, the IRA in Ireland, who also were supplied and trained by U.S. people. The IRA basically trained a bunch of the Colombian FARC forces and the methodologies and systems of how the great IEDs and explosives are making their way north.
It's a fucking petri dish.
It is, and it's an insane school of modern fourth generation warfare, I guess, is what you would call it. But Mexico is a petri dish, and it is something that is now creating. I mean, people were surprised by the drones being utilized as weapons in the Ukrainian war. Like,
why were they surprised about that?
I don't know. Like, it was like a novelty thing for people. Like, I was seeing them in Syria and in Mexico before that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was like drones.
They've been around.
Yeah, like 2011, I think, is when I found. I don't remember exactly. Again, a lot of brain injuries. We found this quad drone in La Avenida Internacional near San Isidro with a giant brick of meth because they were utilizing them to like cross drugs into the U.S. This is 2011.
They're using drones to do drops. Basically.
Yeah. This is 2013 era. I don't remember exactly. It's late. But and then they landed one with a grenade. They landed a drone with a grenade in the backyard of a former like government official in Baja. So this shit has been happening a while, and a lot of the stuff. Again, I mentioned all this because I feel in a lot of ways that Mexico has been utilized as a training ground or as a center of creation for a lot of the stuff you're seeing.
It's experimentation.
Yeah,
that's what you're describing.
Because it's a place. It's a Wild West place.
Yes.
There's no authority realistically. You might go into a town where the local cops are working with one cartel, the state cops are working with another, and the federal cops are working.
How does that even work, though? How do they organize that? Because one is supposed to be outranking another. Hey, guys, if you haven't already subscribed, please hit that subscribe button. It's a huge, huge help. Thank you.
So if you go, Tijuana, I'll use Tijuana as an example because I was there. So in Tijuana, we had the issue that the local municipal police was working with cartels. But it was a weird thing because the city was like the guys in the north part of the city were working with one cartel. So the guys in this other precinct were working with another one. So my former boss and one of my mentors, Lieutenant Colonel Izaola, fascinating guy. He said like, well, how do we deal with that? Well, he would change where they would. So the head of this precinct would be moved to the rival cartel precinct. And the head of this precinct will move to this precinct over here. So either they resigned or they were killed. So that's a way to clean up that in a heartbeat. But sometimes you would go into places where the city was favoring one cartel, the army is favoring another. So like, it's a shit show. Nothing realistically would change for a long period. Either you would eliminate one of the competing cartels and have a little weird agreement with the one that survived, or it only dawned on me years later that a lot of the stuff that I was doing was favoring one cartel, right? In a lot of ways. So, and funny enough, it's the one that dominates, right? In the regions, some of the regions that I operated in now. So it's this case of chopping one head off and two emerging, or chopping a head off and thinking that's the whole of the snake, when you realize that fucking snake leads all the way back to the government. It's a mess, and there's responsibility on both sides. The thing that I want to just knock home on this interview is there's a clear line of responsibility from the U.S. to the origin point of a lot of these issues in Mexico.
Meaning it multifaceted through the potential training that's been happening, through the potential utilization for espionage purposes to allow these things to grow and continue, and through the lack of border security to allow products to be able to easily get into the United States, and also through the use of the actual substances in the United States and the demand for that.
Yeah, I mean, the most corrupt federal institution, police institution in the U.S. is the Border Patrol.
And you've worked with them, right?
Yeah.
You've trained them a little bit.
I've trained the Border Patrol.
What makes them the most corrupt?
Convictions. I'm not saying that as they're the ones that have the most convictions for corruption issues because they're right on the border, right? So, I mean, somebody saying, like, hey, look that way and I'll give you $100,000. I'll leave it in the parking lot over there. Just so you have to look that way so we can cross people through here. I mean, that's
happens all the time. It sounds like
it's not an uncommon thing. Also, the fact that high-level government officials said it was a good idea to just open the border and have these waves of people just going across. Like somebody at a high level in the government said, we should do this. And I'm speaking to people from the Border Patrol that were involved in some of that time of history. I mean, they were completely like, just imagine. I mean,
they had their balls cut off.
Yeah. So where are the investigations there?
Yeah.
Where's the outrage there by the American populace?
I had our mutual friend Rocco Vargas in here a few months ago. And obviously he was there during I guess like the starts of this kind of stuff happening. Yeah. And they're already, forget the corruption for a minute. That kind of blows my mind that they're the most convicted.
As far as convictions go, they're the most corrupt. I mean, they're not. I'm not saying that as to tell you that the whole of the Border Patrol is, because again, I've know some of them, and I've seen them out of their fucking pocket pay for candy or for toothbrushes and give them to people in detention. And people wanting to bitch about U.S. detention centers, come down to Mexico. I'll show you some of the immigration detentions down in Mexico. I'm not saying that they're adequate in any ways. Like they're fucking horrible. I don't want my kid to be in any of these places.
It's relative, you're saying.
It's relative, and also you hear all these people screaming about family separation and some of the horrible conditions in some of these detention sites. But why aren't they screaming for the people all the way in the South that said, come, here's money. Here's buses to bus you all the way there. Here's some cash money. Or all these Americans coming down to Tijuana to give them money or donations in these migrant caravan camps that they had. And then those guys selling the donations in the open air markets and making cash, not giving them to the kids who were props there.
Or the NGOs that just allow the coyotes to bring people over, and they know they're coyotes, and help them out, do their job, to say nothing of the fact that these are the same people putting some of those people they're bringing over who they don't hand to the NGOs into fucking indentured servitude. I mean, it's crazy.
It's crazy. And again, I'm trying to bring home the level of corruption on both sides of the border.
Oh, yeah.
It's wild. It's wild. And as somebody that's experienced it, I get, every time I say, hey, a cop in Mexico, I'm a corrupt guy. All cops in Mexico are corrupt. Yeah, okay, I get it. Like I fucking live like a fucking homeless person. I don't know where I did with all the fucking millions that the cartels gave me, but whatever.
Now you're fucking them and reporting on them.
I'm just speaking about my experience with them. And again, I don't. People that know me and people that have kind of seen my process, like I'm friends with some of the people that I went after in the past because I know how fucking futile and just stupid a lot of the conflict was.
Wait. You're friends with some of the cartel guys you went after?
I'm friends with some of the criminals that I went after. Yeah.
Today, are they still criminals?
No, like one of them's an actor. One of them is a rapper, Conejo. My group arrested him on murder charges while he was hiding in Tijuana, and we're friends now.
So I guess he didn't get convicted.
He got off.
Did he do it?
I don't know. I don't think he did. He seems like a nice guy. I don't think he did.
But you're friends with him now. He left the life. What's his perspective now?
He's like, it's like I remember when we got him. I've always tried to, like, my mom raised me Catholic, like with a ruler,
like the nuns.
That's from doing the sign of the cross with my left hand at Catholic school.
Nice.
So, I don't like dehumanizing anybody, even if they are criminals or like they were like a perceived enemy. You would have this programming that we talked about how people get brainwashed. I was brainwashed in a lot of ways by this training that I went through and the group that I was in. You know, they brainwash you into thinking that you're, you know, I don't know, indestructible, or that you're righteous in what you're doing, and that the people that are in charge of you know what they're doing, and you shouldn't question orders and all this shit.
For people out there who aren't familiar with your story, what group are you talking about?
Baja State Police. Back then, there was an operations group that was kind of the initial start to that experiment. It was a weird institution at the start.
How did they get to you? Did you want to join them, or did they find you?
This is post 9/11. The economy was in the toilet. I was on my second year of medical school, and I just couldn't afford it anymore.
So you had wanted to be a doctor.
Yeah.
Was that a lifelong dream?
Yeah.
What kind of doctor did you want to be?
General practitioner. I just want to be like a community doctor somewhere. Like my mom was a nurse, so that's where I got that from.
That's interesting. So there's something in you that wanted to help people.
Yeah.
At a basic level.
Yeah. And they use that. They use that. At some point in my career, I realized that a lot of the people that I was being told were my enemies I had a lot in common with them. Because
they were plucked too.
Yeah. And it's also like it's not like going, like every now and then I talk to my veteran friends here in the US. It's not the same. It's not the same. I spoke the same language as some of these kids. I could recognize the breakfast that they had that morning by the smell. Some of them were shot in the stomach.
Oh.
So I could recognize what they had for breakfast. Like they had huevos con chorizo. And that shit just gets in your mind. It's just like, holy shit, this is a human being. This could have been me. And there's this weird, it's a different war. It's a different war.
Do you compartmentalize that?
I'll tell you a story. And this, I've talked about this a few times, but I've never I don't think I've talked about this on a podcast. I grew up with this redheaded kid. It was like Canelo, you know, the boxer.
Mm-hmm.
For some reason, we have a lot of redheads down there. Like, the Irish that betrayed the U.S. and went to join us. The French too. There was a bunch of French. Anyway, we'd skateboarded together. And we grew up on the border, so we were very Americanized. This kid skateboarded with me. Cool kid. Used to do a very high ollie. That was his whole thing. Beautiful parents. Their dad and mom still married. Sister. Great kid. Strong. Catholic. He always had a cross on him. We'd give him shit about that. I didn't see him from 16. He disappeared from my life. He just, we went separate ways. And all of a sudden I find him again outside of a gas station. I'm working. I have a Glock stuffed down my pants. I have a Nextel radio in my back pocket. And I'm pretending to not be involved with anything, walking past this gas station where there was a bunch of armed people parked. Suburbans, Tahoes and shit like that. Everybody's wearing plate armor, AKs, not police issue, just a bunch of random ARs and stuff like that. And I was sent there to walk through and to just see what was going on. Somebody among the crowd that was there armed whistles to me and says my name. And my fucking stomach drops to my balls. It's him. Like I turned to him and I could see his freckly fucking nose and red hair peeking out of a little fucking hat that he had on sideways. He's wearing this chest rig with AK-47 magazines on there. He comes over and gives me a big hug. Sticks some of these fucking things in my, like, what are you doing? I'm like, oh man, I'm just,
Just passing through.
Fuck, I just give him some bullshit story about me looking for a job and just not knowing what to fucking do and shit like that. And he, he smiles and kind of like, he knows I'm full of shit.
How many years have passed since he was 16 and you didn't see him again?
So I was 23 back now at that time.
Wow.
He, we exchange pleasantries. We ask each other about each other's parents and shit like that. Before he goes, he says, I know what you do for a living. You should probably leave here. It's pretty dangerous for you. And I said, thank you, So I walk off. I didn't have my Nextel was going off. It's fucking vibrating. The army showed up. As soon as I got back to where I came from, the army showed up and got into a firefight with all of them. You could hear it from blocks away. The roar of these G3 rifles and AK just fucking going. Fucking kid grab my plate, put it on, grab all my shit. Everybody's fucking roll to where this was happening. By the time we got there, it was over. It was a few minutes. I spent probably like 40 minutes to an hour looking for him. I couldn't find him. Like I was trying to pretend that I was like securing the area and shit like that, but I was like I was looking for my friend. He was under a car. He tried to escape under a car. The only way I recognized him was his hair because his face was gone. How can I dehumanize him or like this is the enemy? I stayed with him in his body until late into the night, and I received his parents so they could recognize him. It's a different war down there. It's not overseas. It's not an enemy that you can't recognize. These are kids. These are fucking kids shooting at each other for what? Allegiance to a cartel? To supply the U.S. with a substance? Because they are living in a country that is rife with corruption and that has people in power that don't give a fuck about its citizenship. And allow young people like myself at that time to be dragged into this war. I mean, are the people that trained me to do what I had to do in that time any different than the people that went and trained them to do what they had to do for these cartels at one time? What's the difference there? That's just one kid that was eaten by this. This kid had a lot of potential. He's like an athlete kid, but just there's no opportunities.
Now he disappeared from your life when you were 16, and you don't know exactly what happened, but you could probably guess. Correct me if I'm wrong.
He was recruited.
Right. Someone came and tapped him on the shoulder. 16-year-old kid. Say, you come with us now. So here's why I say that. What choice does that kid have?
Zero. Not a lot. But what choice did I have? It was either going to where this fucking newspaper told me that I was going to be a part of something special, or to finally cave into some of my friends who were driving loads across the San Ysidro border into San Diego. Say, hey, Ed, it's easy money. All you have to do is just drive this car and leave it in this parking lot over here.
And those are your friends.
And those are my friends.
Those are your friends. Now imagine if the wrong guy came to the skate park, though, when you were 16. Not your friend.
Yeah.
Older guy.
Yeah.
You wouldn't be here right now.
Probably
or you'd
not.
be down there doing this shit.
Probably not. But like I want Americans to like realize there is no safety net. There is no unemployment check. There is no social security in Mexico. There is no outreach program. There is no say no to drugs, kids. And if there is, it's a joke, you know? It is survive.
Mm-hmm.
It is figuring out how to get what you need and then leave everything out, leave everybody else to the side, you know, me first. And the level of just dehumanization and normalization that has happened. Again, Americans are just learning about this Auschwitz in Jalisco. And that's the way they call it because they have no other way of calling it because all the shoes and all the people that were burned. So Auschwitz is what they come up with. This has been happening for decades down there. During the first parts of the Ukrainian conflict, Mexico had performed that war with bodies. Like there were more there were more bodies in Mexico in the first 3 days of the Ukrainian war than in Mexico than there were in the Ukrainian conflict. And somehow there's no war going on down there. You have a federal government in Mexico stating that the U.S. should do this, should do that, and all this rhetoric about but Mexico's sovereignty and all this. Meanwhile, there's a European cartel head guy in Mexico City got assassinated because he was a direct link between those Mayos and their influences in Europe. You're seeing Chinese manufactured and produced precursors and chemicals coming into Mexico through its ports, which are military manned, and nothing is happening. You get a lot of people assassinated that work those ports from the military, but nobody's asking questions like, hey, how is all this shit getting into the country? You have now a U.S. utilizing that as a threatening device to Mexico, and those tariffs are not going to affect anybody but us. The government, they're going to be fine. Those tariffs are going to affect the small companies that sell, do, and move things. That's who's going to be affected. The small people. Cartels are going to give a shit about those tariffs. And again, these organizations were created and fostered by the same governments that are now going after them. I think that's a reality that I don't think gets talked about. And again, maybe Trump wasn't responsible directly for the origin of the Zeta cartel or the origin of the Sinaloa cartel, but he's there now, and he's pointing the finger at them as a terrorist organization. And just like we pointed the finger at Al Qaeda at some point and figured out that we created Al Qaeda, or just how we pointed the finger at some of the stuff that was going on in Syria. And now we're coming to learn that a lot of these freedom fighters that were in Syria fighting were actually former Al Qaeda people that are now being paid and trained by the U.S. government to do all this shit is coming out now. I can't wait to see what other type of involvement and stuff comes out from the Mexico side of things.
From the Mexico side of things.
Yeah, the war that is going on and has been going on in Mexico and the U.S.'s direct involvement in aspects of it. Again, Fast and the Furious is just the tip of an iceberg, I think, of the U.S. basically arming a single cartel force in Mexico. The Zetas are trained by U.S. Special Operations, and they're also School of the America graduates, some of them I've heard. So there's a responsibility there. Former presidents of Mexico being CIA bankrolled people. There's definitely some sort of interaction there. Some major government officials being touted as uncorruptible and being showered with awards and accolades by federal officials in the U.S. are now in federal custody on cartel charges.
Mm-hmm. It's hard not to get cynical.
And we have El Mayo Zambada, the historical figurehead of the Sinaloa cartel, issuing a statement of warning to the Mexican federal government that if he doesn't get released and tried for his crimes in Mexico, it's going to destabilize the region. And while that's happening, a bunch of pictures of both the president of Mexico and a lot of his top officials, like this, with all of Mayo Zambada's lawyers and direct representatives. The rat's nest is large and crosses the border.
How would, if in a perfect world you waved a wand and all of it came out, how would there not be a massive explosion into itself in Mexico for the entire system? Meaning all the rats would be running off the ship and they'd be killing everyone while they run off the ship. And I'm not just talking cartels. I'm talking the people in the government. I'm talking the military. I'm talking if it all came out, like the system's bad right now. It's violent. There's death happening every day, right? But I'm just making round numbers to make this simple. If there's 10,000 deaths happening in the country right now, which is objectively horrible, a day, you know, who's to say that if you pulled the rug out from this thing, there wouldn't be a period of 2 years where it's just a war-torn country where 200,000 people are dying a day?
I think,
you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Well, again, I keep looking at the government's rhetoric right now of invasion and military operations still being it's still an option. So I think the U.S. itself and people in charge right now are planning for something like that, I think.
To invade.
To cause a change in Mexico that is very dramatic.
Okay, let's go to this now. I've been waiting to go to this throughout this whole conversation.
Sure.
You've mentioned it several times.
Sure.
We did just declare them a terrorist organization.
Yeah, there is now on the books a clear designation of that these organizations are terrorist organizations, cartels. Which is, and they issued a list of all the cartels that are included in this designation.
Were there any left off that you were surprised?
Not really. I think I was surprised that a lot of the names that are on that list or the organizations that are on that list have a clear representation in the U.S. I mean, they're clearly here in the U.S. But it's somehow this designation just it reaches.
Well, that's what makes it weird.
South. Yeah,
because it's like if you're going to designate I've heard people talk about this. I was talking with Matt Hedger about this. It's like if you're going to designate them terrorists over there, it would be so obvious. Like if we had known that there's Al Qaeda cells here, like they go to take them down. So why aren't they taking them down?
Let's say that you found out like this post 9/11 world.
Yeah.
And we find out, and again, I'm just going to be an example, that Taylor Swift has been laundering money for Al Qaeda, right? Let's say this is a fictional story. We find out
to get that on the record.
Yeah, it's a fictional story. we figure out that Taylor Swift is laundering money for Al Qaeda. What should happen to Taylor Swift? Somebody's going to
again. It's a fictional story, but
she's going to get a knock at the door probably, and there's going to be some heat. Okay, so we currently have a Mexican popular singer by the name of Peso Pluma, who is clearly, and like this, he sings about it. This guy sings about his relationship. Peso Pluma. He sings about it. He sings about it in his songs, and it's clear as day that he has some sort of tie.
This guy does.
Yeah.
He's in the U.S.?
Yeah, he's in the U.S. He's on
the cover of Rolling Stone.
Yeah.
Nice.
Now, this designation puts one of the organizations that basically fostered his rise is on that terrorist designation list.
How do we know they fostered his rise?
Because he sings about it. I mean, if people are like, "Hey, Ed, come on," he sings about it.
Now, devil's advocate here. There's rappers who sing about doing shit they didn't do.
But this is if I am saying something that isn't true, we'll hear about it, I guess. But there's a clear line there. So I'm asking if this is a serious attempt by the United States to actually go after these organizations, why aren't we hearing anything on this side about, tequila companies that are
funded by them,
funded by political figures in the U.S.? They have to have somebody in politics out here.
Oh yeah.
We just saw the arrest of not Mayo, Nemesio Ceguera Cervantes, the head of the New Generation Cartel, who may or may not be dead because nobody knows.
But he's arrested, and now he may or may not be dead.
His son-in-law faked his death in Mexico.
Okay.
And miraculously resurrected himself and was arrested in Riverside, California.
Oh.
So what are we doing realistically with this designation? Is this an attempt by the United States to actually eliminate a cartel problem? And this fentanyl epidemic, which the United States created, by the way.
Why do you say we created it?
Because you prescribe fentanyl in the U.S. for a long period of time to people. And then
talking about like the Sacklers and stuff?
The opiate epidemic and all that, that's good American. So and then when they realized that a lot of the orchards that were being populated with marijuana grows were no longer necessary because you guys are growing weed up here, we cut that off, and now we put heroin in there, and then we mix it with fentanyl to give it a kick. So there's some sort of involvement from China. There's some sort of involvement from the U.S.
Yeah, we'll come back to China. Yeah,
we'll talk about that in a bit. But so, what's going on? Is this an attempt by the U.S. to actually get things in control as far as drug and cartels, or is this an attempt by the U.S. to control its biggest trade partner? Is this an attempt by the U.S. to create an industrial plan in Mexico? Because Mexico is probably the next China. It's on its way to be the next China. China is lagging behind economically. China is getting a drop off. We don't hear a lot about people immigrating to China. I think China's probably gonna go out of. I don't
hear about a lot of people immigrating to Mexico though. Too, in all fairness.
Well, there's a bunch of Venezuelans and Haitians right now trying to seek asylum in Mexico. So we need to.
And then they're probably trying to find their way here
because they were trying to find their way here. Now the border's closed, so now they're trying to stay in Mexico. But
meaning it's not like good talent. Like there aren't engineers to your example, going from here to China.
I want to correct you.
Okay, please. That's why you're here.
There are a shit ton of immigrants in Mexico right now from a very impoverished country. I want you to try and guess which country this is.
It's not someone in South America.
It's the United States.
What?
90% of all new housing in Tijuana, for example, is being bought off by Americans who can't afford to live in San Diego.
Okay, but that's also right on the border.
But there's a bunch of communities elsewhere, like Tulum is ruined by all the Americans living down there.
Yeah, train just went there.
Mexico City has open revolt against all the Americans who are living down there, who are all, if we're honest about it, economic migrants. So yeah, Mexico fosters a shit ton of migrants.
Oh,
so I just wanted to get
shoes on the other foot now.
I just want to get that clear. What I think the U.S. is trying to what I think the U.S. is trying to do long term is that I think the U.S. sees in Mexico the potential that it has to be a economic superpower. I think it has the potential. I think one Mexican worker is equal to 3 or 4 Chinese workers as far as productivity.
So one Mexican's better than 3 or 4 Chinese?
Yeah.
Chinese got to get it together.
And the U.S., the first time Trump came into power, he had this whole, bring manufacturing back to the U.S., which was stupid in a lot of ways.
Why?
We did that in Mexico. And speaking purely as a strategist, I guess, the trade agreement he came up with Mexico, the renegotiated trade agreement was brilliant for the U.S., not for Mexico, but for the U.S. So that was a pretty strong deal for him.
Great deal.
Great deal. Like he fucking he hit it on the park with that. Again, from the U.S. perspective, not Mexico. But he told a bunch of companies in Mexico to leave Mexico and come back and manufacture in the United States. China took full advantage of this.
Yeah.
I mean, it was viewed as a punishment to Mexico, but then we saw a giant influx of Chinese investment. during the Biden administration, the peso was one of the strongest currencies in the planet. Like it didn't fluctuate, and it was because of all this foreign investment coming into Mexico, fostered by that first Trump administration. So I think what Trump figured out and started seeing, or some of the people around him started seeing, is that a lot of these Chinese companies, manufacturing companies, to try and get around tariffs, started saying, "Hey, we're going to build the first Mexican electric car." But all the parts of that Mexican electric car are made in China, most of them. So that's a way to get around the tariffs. So in a lot of ways, I think he realized that the Chinese were trying to get around a lot of this by figuring out a control and or a good solid footprint as far as investment and collaboration with the Mexican government, and basically cutting the U.S. off. So I think a lot of what we're seeing now as far as terrorist designation of cartels, tariffs being pressured against Mexico, the Mexican political bloc being at odds with the American political bloc as far as who's in charge. I mean, Trump represents some interest, and Claudia Sheinbaum represents clearly other different interests.
What do you mean by that specifically?
I mean, Claudia Sheinbaum is all the way to the left.
Right.
Is open Chavista, open supporter of Venezuela. So that's her. And on the Trump side, we have like completely the opposite of that.
Yeah.
So I think that's
literally just a political divide, you're saying.
That's a political divide, and also the U.S. is realizing that Mexico is much more valuable than it wants to admit. And I think control is a big aspect of this. We're hearing a lot of expansionist talk about in the U.S. about buying.
Yeah, we're going to buy Canada, apparently.
And I don't think you're going to buy Mexico, but I think you are going to and are exerting your control over it. And I think one of the first things you do as an opposing force to control a place is to cause shit and start shit in the area.
Destabilize it.
So the main claim that the federal government has against the United States for the legal arrest of El Mayo Zambada, is that it destabilized Sinaloa. And it did. I mean, it started a fucking war there. So there's definitely some sort of high level game being played.
Yeah.
And Mexico is at the center of it. China is involved in it as well. If you want to think about some of the complexes that have been going on in Mexico, you have the New Generation Cartel who controls ports in and out of Mexico in a lot of ways, including one big one in Colima, who were not affected by the COVID lockdowns when they happened, as far as their supply of fentanyl, for example. So who's moving fentanyl into Mexico even during the shutdowns? New Generation Cartel. Mm. So are they being fostered or supported by some sort of entities in China that are keeping these shipments coming?
Yeah.
Who knows? No, maybe it's the triads or like criminal organizations in China. Nothing happens in China without
That's right.
The Chinese have the biggest intelligence operation on the planet because everybody who is Chinese is a part of this operation. So there's something going on there. On the Sinaloa side of the cartel, when the COVID thing was happening, they were smuggling fentanyl from the U.S. into Mexico to infuse their product and then ship it back. Like they caught a guy I think in San Isidro with a shit ton of fentanyl back then. So you start seeing these weird fucking influences and games, and you start realizing that there's a proxy war of a sort in Mexico going on. And Mexico is very much being utilized as a proxy war type setting.
Yeah, well, they're the middleman of it, and the war's happening on multiple ends, not the least of which is also in America, where the downstream effects of this are killing people. And to be fair, I'm glad you brought it up earlier. Like, the market was also created by people here.
Yeah.
Through the opioid epidemic and the disgusting nature of what the Sacklers and Purdue Pharma did to this country, which, you know, I try to like take the tinfoil hat off sometimes and just be like, all right, you know, there's just evil people. But it is hard to look at a story like that and say there is not something coordinated there. Yeah. They were allowed to operate with total impunity, and then they were able to make a deal where none of them are in prison.
It's wild. It's wild. You know, who are their lobbyists? You know, right. What are they doing? Like, why can't we look at that aspect of it? The legalization of marijuana in the United States was said to like bring it's going to put a dent in cartel finances. Was something you would hear a lot. Cartels came to the U.S. and started fucking growing that weed illegally in federal lands and mixing in it with the legal stuff. Cartels started putting their money into money laundering operations in places like Colorado because fucking it's cash only fucking institutions. Yep. So it didn't do shit. It actually made it grow and it gave them another angle.
And it's also their lowest as far as like poundage that they can move and profit that they can make. It's at the bottom of their totem pole.
And that was at the start of legalization. Now you have Chinese gangs, which we don't hear a lot about, doing some of the same operations and going into the illegal weed business being grown and then sold through other legal manner.
Yeah, Jorge talked a lot about this.
So the Chinese gangs and organizations. And again, we can't talk about Chinese criminal organizations that are kind of independent from the government. All of them have some sort of...
They do.
So if we really look at it closely, it's not Chinese-based gangs. It's fucking...
Yeah, what we deem as criminal gangs, though, are effectively spies. They don't... It's the same way that, like, you'll hear... any spy you talk to in the United States government, when they go on these podcasts, they'll say your job was to be a criminal on behalf of the United States somewhere else. I'll bet they were considered gangsters in some of the things they did in certain places. So what's the difference here?
There's a video of a line of Chinese nationals at the Mexico border.
In Tijuana?
Yeah. I want you to, if you can find that video, I recognize a military haircut when I see one, and I recognize people not moving their right arm when they're moving around. So like, look at the luggage, look at the clothing. I mean, they're poor and impoverished people. Yeah. They're taking full advantage of a stupid government policy.
Absolutely.
To like, come on, look at that.
Yeah.
Look, the hands behind the back is, very Asian, I guess. But there's videos of them walking around. the videos of them walking around. You have people basically walking around without moving their right hand.
Like a Secret Service kind of type deal.
I mean, Putin walks around without moving his right hand because he's strapped. Putin is always strapped.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that these guys are strapped, but some of these people that went across that border, if you could look at that, just that little element, I mean, these are people that have weapons training.
Of course.
And these guys were welcomed. They were welcomed, and they had orders issued in their native language as far as like, hey, this is how you have to go here.
Oh, it's even so. We had Nick Shirley in here for episode 214 last summer. He got a hold of those, and he had it translated, and we read it on that podcast. It is down to the smallest detail, starting with where they start, all the way to some random little court in bumblefuck town in the middle of the United States, and people out there are trying to imagine every single thing between there. Yeah, it's all covered.
Yeah,
every single day.
Yeah.
It's easy. It's like there. I've used this a lot in other contexts, talked about this before. How foreign nations in the ideological warfare and stuff will use our democracy against ourselves. Another example with China would be TikTok. I don't like communism at all, right? But one very useful thing that they can do with that totalitarian power is their kids have their TikTok turn off at 9 o'clock at night, and they're watching nature videos and science videos. Our kids have it on 24/7, and they're watching titty videos. Same thing here. They're using our immigration system, which is obviously extremely broken, and you've experienced that up close, against us to be able to get people all the way through these nooks and crannies down the line to the legal process. Like, have them use the legal process to, once they're in the system and they're just allowed to stay here while that's going on, now they can go disappear.
Yeah. And we're not even talking about real estate, which they are definitely invested in. Like, go to places like LA and around there.
Go to New York. Look at these buildings.
Yeah. So, and TikTok in Mexico it's a whole other thing. It's an interesting thing. That's one of the things that I don't get from the Trump administration, why there was an effort to save TikTok. TikTok is not the friend of anybody as far as the in Mexico. If you want to cross the U.S. Mexico border, you go on TikTok. That's where that's where the classifieds are.
The classifieds?
Like, yeah, who is the best smuggler to cross me the border? You go on TikTok to look them up. There's a bunch of videos on TikTok of successful smugglers basically showing off that they just cross somebody across the border, and they're all over TikTok. And that somehow we need to save that, you know. Social media is what it is, and I get it. Freedom of information. I'm an anarchist by heart, man. I grew up punk rock. I get it. But some of these things are clearly and obviously being utilized to manipulate and just do bad shit to people. China is definitely an enemy. Mexico has definitely been infiltrated and used in a lot of ways by Chinese state operatives and the Chinese state to go after U.S. interest or just being an antagonistical to U.S. interest in the past.
And they're running a reverse opium war too.
There you go, which is pretty poetic if you kind of think about it.
It's very poetic.
It's very poetic. I think one thing that I've also kind of seen, and you see that with the new generation cartel, there's a video and pictures of the new generation cartel. They're all kitted out in black, and they have signal jammers on their shoulders.
Signal jammers.
Yeah, it's multi-frequency signal jammers. They have multiple antennas on them. So when you see these videos, those things are meant to cut signals, cell phone signals, radio signals, any sort of signals coming out of an environment. And all of those are like, when I saw those are like Temu, you know, those are Chinese bootleg manufactured pieces of shit. And the uniforms are all Chinese manufactured copies of US tactical shit. Their nylon gear is all, so you could see that there's a supply line of some sort from China to Mexico that is supplying that cartel. I don't think they're dumb enough to send anything like a remote guided missile or anything like that. Although a lot of the stuff that was sold to the Ukrainians, apparently, and this, I haven't seen any of it directly myself, but I've heard rumblings in federal government in Mexico about some of those radio guided missiles that were given to the Ukrainians to defend themselves against the Russians showing up in Mexico.
Oh shit, they made their way back here.
A lot of the stuff that the U.S. left behind in Afghanistan, including some high level vision, not optical night vision stuff and stuff like that, is also ending up in Mexico. I mean, so yeah, it's a shit show, and there's just responsibilities are everywhere. It's mistaken as Americans to view this as a Mexico versus U.S. problem. There's high level politics going on. There's proxy war shit going on. Mm-hmm. There is a responsibility that the United States has with some of the issues going on in Mexico that goes back a while.
Yeah. Decades and decades and decades.
And there is a giant responsibility that the Mexican government and the Mexican people have themselves. Undoubtedly. I'm not here to say that Mexico is a victim of all this and the U.S. is the big bad.
Right.
Both sides are fucking have their hands bloody. I'd say just is if you're viewing this objectively and you're looking at this problem and you have a MAGA hat on or you have a rainbow hat on or you have whatever hat you have on, you know, division is part of this issue and it's been utilized for years. Us versus them.
Yes.
But at the end of the day, you know, Trump's not going to show up to the cemetery to bury this 13, 14-year-old kid who was experimenting with drugs, and now he's in a grave somewhere. Claudia Sheinbaum is not going to, you know, show up to one of these migrant caravan camps in Mexico to talk to some of the girls and ask them like, "Hey, how many times have you been raped on your way up here?" Because that would be anti-immigration rhetoric, and she's not going to be able to say anything like that, because we're supposed to be welcoming and just fostering, like, oh, people just want to move freely, so we need to. So there's a dark effort on both sides of this border to keep some shit under wraps. I think we're living in a day and age where truth is whatever you want to make it, I guess.
Yeah. You're right about that.
But there are things that are coming into light now that have been festering, at least that I knew about, and I was talking about 5 years back.
More than that.
From mass graves to government corruption and participation in a lot of these things, to the military being part of the problem. 5 years ago, I was asked this question, like, "Hey, if you could do something, what would you do?" Like a magic wand thing. Like, and I said, "Well, that's beyond my pay grade." But I did say, whatever effort is going to be done to stabilize Mexico from the perspective of America can't involve the federal government because they're part of the issue. I was laughed at.
So how do you go around that? You shouldn't be laughed at for that. I fully understand why you say that.
Yeah, but back then I was ridiculed for it.
By people who have no idea what they're talking about. So how do you go around that?
I think this is where the U.S. is headed. I think they're going to make an example out of one or two former heads of state in Mexico.
Make an example out of them?
How many times have you ever heard of a Mexican president being arrested on cartel and corruption charges? How can you cause an immediate change from the top down? You chop the head off a king.
So you think, like, I'm painting a hypothetical, they'll have Claudia Sheinbaum arrested?
I don't think they're going to have Claudia Sheinbaum arrested. I don't think they're going to have anybody arrested in office now. But they are going to look at somebody from the past administrations.
Like Vicente Fox or something?
Vicente is dirty. Calderon had a very dirty person in charge of national safety in his cabinet.
Luna.
And again, I don't know, but how can all this shit happen without anybody knowing about it?
It can't.
So you have you have a line of presidents, and you have AMLO there as well. And again, I'm going to have a lot of people on the left side of the political spectrum in Mexico say, "What do you mean AMLO? AMLO's clean. He was
the guy before, right?
He was the guy before Claudia, right?
He was the one hugs, not bullets.
He was hugs, not bullets. And
which was probably invented by the fucking cartel guys laughing in some room with him somewhere.
But he represents more than half of Mexico, because more than half of Mexico voted for him to be in power. And there's a lot of people who are very passionate about him as a figure of change and a figure that transformed Mexico and somebody that's going after all these corrupt officials and all that. But we can't lose sight of the fact that most of the people that are in that party used to belong to all these parties that he's saying that were corrupt, but they're not. We have to realize that his abrazos no balazos pause in this efforts against these criminal organizations made shit worse.
Yeah.
Made the problem grow.
Couldn't have predicted that.
This Auschwitz that was found was probably active during his administration.
Yeah.
Who is he going to blame about it? He's going to blame, like, his whole thing was blaming Calderon about everything. Like, Calderon kicked off this drug war. He was stupid. Like, he should be in jail, in prison. He did everything like exactly the same in his administration. He militarized the drug war. He militarized the federal police.
He militarized the drug war, the same guy who's saying hugs, not bullets? How does that work?
He made so there was a federal police unit in all Mexico. La Policía Federal was a civilian unit. And the first thing he says, well, we're going to get rid of all the military, and soldiers are going to go back to their cartel, to their bases, and no more militarized persecution of the cartels. And the first thing he does is makes the Guardia Nacional, which is a national federal police that is part of the military. Huh. People need to realize this. Mexico has two people in charge. The military as a whole is one person, and the president of Mexico. Those are the people who are in charge of all Mexico. The military, number one, and the president, number two.
Are they separate? They're
separate. And if people want to know how much power the Mexican military has in Mexico, you had a figure by the name of General Cienfuegos, if you can pull him up. General Cienfuegos was active during the
Salvador Cienfuegos?
Yeah. Okay. He was basically heading up all military operations against cartels during the Enrique Peña Nieto administration.
Okay.
And the United States Justice Department figured out that he was actually talking to high-level cartel people over the phone and coordinating things.
How did they figure that out? They tapped his phone?
Somebody somewhere. Like I haven't had access to what they had. But he left that job and he went to Disneyland with his family, I think, or something like that. And he got picked up by the DEA at the airport. They were going to charge him. They were going to throw the book at him, make an example out of him. And then The State Department issued a letter to the Justice Department saying that for reasons of international security and relationship, we need to send this individual back with all the evidence so he gets tried in his own country, Mexico. So let him go. So all charges were not dropped, but he was basically put into the custody of Mexico. Mexico said, yeah, we'll try him. This is Andres Manuel Lopez Obrador. Yeah, we'll try him. He landed in handcuffs. Those get taken off, put him in a car, and he gets a military escort to his house. And that's it.
Never charged.
Nope.
Hey guys, if you haven't already subscribed, please hit that subscribe button. It's a huge, huge help. Thank you.
So that's so if this is so if basically the Mexican army pressured the U.S. government to let one of their own go, that's what happened. There's no ifs and they used the presidency of Mexico to like, hey, get him out or we're going to be sad about this, I guess.
I wonder what chits they had to call home on that one.
I mean, so if people want to look at the whole of this issue, the army is involved. The presidency is involved. State, local government is involved. The U.S. is involved. Like everybody has a hand in this. It's not an issue of us versus them. And again, I keep saying this is a regional issue. This is not like a Mexico issue or a U.S. issue. This is a regional issue. And the reason I say that is because we are economically tied to the hip.
Yeah.
And also our families are like intertwined.
Yes.
It's like absurd. Americans live down in Mexico. Shit ton of them.
And how many of them live in America now? Like we don't even know the number.
We don't even know the number, but there's a ridiculous number of Mexicans living out here.
Yeah. Most represented.
And again, illegal immigration, and I may be called out for saying this, but illegal immigration in the United States is essential for the economy. It is essential. There have been places where laws have been passed so that people can't fucking show up to a grow and do la pisca, work on a field. And the economy's crashed there locally, so the laws were changed immediately. Illegal immigration in the United States is essential.
But if they're trying to stop it, though,
that's what I'm saying that because I don't think they are really.
You don't think you seen this fucking Tom Homan guy?
I've seen them. I've seen some of those raids and all that. I've seen some people being deported that had absolutely fucking nothing criminal about them except the way they crossed into the United States, who have been working quietly for 20 years, who were supporting families and shit like that, being deported down to Tijuana, and now they're what the fuck to do.
Yeah.
So I've seen the injustices being done by some of these policies. But on the other end, I've also seen some of the darker stuff that is being done by people like the Chinese government sending a shit ton of their citizenship through the border.
Yeah.
Or people who are consuming the lives of young people sexually.
How do you, if you don't stop illegal immigration, though, how do you stop that stuff?
Bracero program. I mean, there was worker programs, and there are worker programs across the country that legally bring Mexican labor into the United States to work
and pay them at less than minimum wage.
No, they legalize. They're working legal. They have their wages. They have their ways. There's ways of doing this legally, but there are institutions, corporations, and companies that won't want to fucking pay out, so they don't want to fucking do that.
Right, because they can pay them less.
Right. Or also if they're done with them, they can just call the fucking immigration authorities on.
Right, and they're the people that pay off all the politicians who get into office and make the legislation.
Yep, and some of them were, Trump campaign financiers and stuff like that.
Yes.
Which is, and again, that's when you just look at the money. With all of these issues, look at the money.
Exactly right.
Look at the money. And
I tell people all the time, I'm like, you're not going to get all good. You can get all bad.
Yeah.
But all these people, whoever your God is politically, I don't care what candidate or what office they're in. I hate to be that guy, to be cynical. They're dirty whether they want to be or not.
Yeah.
Period. End of story.
Yeah.
When I go and I vote, and I've done this since the last time I pulled the trigger for someone was in 2016. And I voted in every election except 2020. I have the great distinction in this job that other people do not have this luxury out there, to where when I go in there, down to every position, including dog catcher, I vote journalist abstain, which is how I do my job.
Okay.
But if I didn't do this job and I actually had to make a decision and, felt like I would want to be a part of the process, I don't think I'd have anyone to choose, because I do look at this stuff. I do look at who pays people, and there is fucking dirt on everyone.
Let me like shift this conversation.
Shift it away.
As somebody from Mexico, right? I view the Trump phenomenon with different eyes. I'm from Tijuana, where we assassinated a political candidate for the presidency. He was at the
Who was that?
Colosio.
When was this?
This was in the 90s, early 90s. He was walking around a place where he shouldn't be walking around, and somebody pulled a gun out in a crowd and shot him in the head. Maybe one person, maybe two. Political assassinations of that nature usually have some sort of motivation behind them, or an attempt to keep somebody from doing something that the greater powers don't want to have happen.
That's right.
Why do you think they tried to kill Trump? And who did? Which is something that gives me pause sometimes when I think about the amount of, I've started to feel like home here in the U.S. when I started seeing all the legal system being weaponized against Trump. That's some Banana Republic level shit.
Yeah.
That's some Banana Republic level shit. When I started seeing the multiple assassination attempts that we heard about, the one we saw on TV, which people say it's fake. Like I know it 223 run going, right? Yeah. And also this assassin that we know nothing about, who was a ghost on social media somehow at that age, which is a weird thing. My question is, like, from your perspective as a journalist and as an American, does it give you pause to say, like, maybe he is trying to actually do something that is counter to the powers that be?
Yeah, let me give you,
because a lot of Mexicans give pause sometimes. Like, yeah, he's the bad guy. He's like they're telling us he's the bad guy, and he's evil. Not, but why did they try to kill him?
Why are they trying to kill him? Yeah, I think it's a fair question. Let me give more context to what I just said a couple minutes ago. When I say all these people are dirty, they're not all knowingly. I would like to think all politicians are dirty just because they put a bad taste in your mouth, just because of the job they do and the fact that they even wanted to do it in the first place. But to be clear, they're not all dirty because they actually are voluntarily trying to be dirty. They're dirty because they're a part of a system where it is impossible to not have cash slushing around somewhere that then is going to impact the decisions they make, that therefore makes them dirty. And so when I look at a guy like Trump, do I think there's some people around him that he definitely in the back of his head knows fucking sucks, and maybe there's some reason he has to be tied to them, and that's like a little dirty? Yes. But are there other things that are actually an outsider about him that, even if they're not 100% right, they got the arrow pointed in the right direction for the first time in fucking generations on either party? Do I think that those things could exist to the point that, like, he is someone that, yeah, there could be forces that want to see him gone because of that, which makes you think, like, maybe there's some good there? Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. You have to say, like, I think that, I don't know how much subjectivity there is there. Yeah. I think that's very objective.
For me, and for most Mexicans that have this momentary pause when they look at him, and again, I'm not saying he's a good character. He inflames people. He's a joker in a lot of ways.
Yes.
He says shit, wild shit, and it's very easy to make him the enemy or the bad guy in Mexico, because all you have to do is point to a few videos of him saying some shit. And
the rapists, the murderers, all the rapists, some I assume are good people.
Yeah, all that. It's fascinating.
Yeah.
But then why try to kill him, and why try to imprison him with all these weird fucking charges?
Which were all bullshit.
And again, it gives people pause. And like in Mexico, they're like looking at, just like Americans had a momentary pause during the election cycle when that 223 round nicked his ear and was bloodied, and like, wait a minute, I know I hated this guy, but why are they trying to kill him? Let's vote for him anyway, just to see what happens.
Yep.
it's an interesting phenomenon, I guess. He is a clear, like for the majority of Mexicans, he's the enemy in a lot of ways. And again, it's easy to see how the media has done its job there, and also it's easy to see how he himself and a lot of his base have done that job of creating this narrative, screaming at people to go back to their home country. And you know, I've been shouted at by people wearing that red hat. You know.
Oh yeah.
And I get it, I understand, but I've also been shouted out by people on the other side. So I get the whole, you know, being in this divide of a country. I have family in the U.S. And I have a pretty clear path in my mind where I'm trying to make things better for them and whatever future that is going to come up for them. I think there's no way moving forward into the future without both countries figuring something out.
Yes.
Mexico has more than earned its place on an international stage as far as a place where culture gets created. We have the best food on the planet. Fight me.
Italians out there.
Fight me.
Yeah.
Fight me. Let's go to Italy, and you know, wherever
I've
you
lived there. It's pretty fucking good.
Good. I'll take you to Tijuana, and the street food there is
Okay.
going to kill anything in a restaurant.
But
But
they
that's
might
just
kill me while I'm there too.
Nah. Come on, Italians, you're pretty fucking thick skinned. Come on. So what I'm saying is, there's no moving into the future without us being together on this. The fires in Los Angeles and all the houses that were destroyed. Who's going to build those back? I know a lot of my friends who work in construction. You know, who's going to build those?
Yeah.
We have this giant movement across the country where people are trying to now move away from fentanyl, and it is less of it is still an issue. But less people are dying of overdoses because doctors are getting better at dealing with fentanyl exposure. Because there's Narcan everywhere. Like I remember getting a whole bag full of it in Portland because the government gives it out. So I was like, put some of that in here, just in case.
Fucking Portland.
But you start seeing this change in the world. So like fentanyl is probably on its way out as well. Now, what comes
You
next?
think it's on its way out?
I think it's on its
all the problems we have.
I think it's on its way out. I think it's getting mixed in with something called trank now. I think people are wise to it in a lot of ways. Maybe some people with mental issues that are living on the street and that fucking get that. But it's no longer that urban drug or that drug that people are fucking taking into like, I'm going to take this fentanyl as I work this fucking 9-to-5 job.
But it's also getting laced into everything too.
That's-
Someone at the club's going to do coke. Turns out it's not coke.
But it's I think we're all of us experiencing an education, and everybody's now realizing that whatever that shit is, it's probably not the best idea.
I hope you're right.
I think between that and sourcing a lot of this stuff and some of those blind lines and change, hopefully getting affected. That's another aspect of this that people need to take into account. We have seen the historic dismantling of the Sinaloa cartel, right? Mm-hmm. Recently. I mean, all of us have been looking at this on the news. Mass arrest, all of our cartel heads being sent from Mexico to the U.S. Have we seen a spike in drug prices in the U.S.?
No.
No? Or shortages?
No.
Are there like
the resources are just being sloshed around?
Are the hospitals being filled with people that are going through withdrawals because of the drugs not going through because of all the cartel guys being in prison?
Right.
So nothing's fucking changed is what I'm trying to say.
Yes.
So whatever designation means, whatever the tariffs mean as far as pressure, whatever the giant show that the Mexican government is doing for its U.S. audience, like, hey, look at us, we're making a difference now. Look at what we're doing. None of that has made a real clear effect on the U.S. side that we can see. The only thing that I've seen change is immigration. Like there's not 1,000 or 2,000 people showing up at some of these border crossing areas. There's like 20 now. But, that's one aspect of this issue, this problem, which I think, what's more important for national security? Poison being pumped through the border, or a bunch of Venezuelans running around in mopeds in the middle of New York with debit cards that are living in hotels?
I see where the argument is. Yeah, technically.
Yeah. So again, both of these are issues that need to be solved, but like, why aren't we seeing this dramatic drop of drug use and or supply?
Because there's tunnels, because there's catapults, because there's fucking people on this side of the border who are in business with those people who are taking care of getting it in, because there's boats.
Because manufacturing is now probably happening in the U.S.
Probably, oh yeah.
Because people don't want to talk about that, but that's probably.
Do you have evidence of that? I mean, I believe you, but
probably I don't have any evidence of that, except just realizing that there's absolutely no dent being put into the problem by all the operations going on in Mexico. So
there's operations in Canada, we know that.
So it's probably being manufactured here somewhere, or probably just being sent through the mail from different places overseas. So, like, what are we doing? What are we doing? People need to realize that a lot of their taxpayer money is being sent to Mexico and has been sent to Mexico for decades, paying the wages of cops, equipment. There's certain U.S.-based companies that sell uniforms, tactical equipment, firearms, vehicles that have made millions off this by selling some of the stuff to the Mexican government. And every year, the violence increases. Isn't that a shitty investment?
It is a shitty investment.
Who's looking into that? Where's Doge right now? Where are they looking into Plan Merida, which is basically this binational plan where the U.S. is basically paying for the outsourcing of the drug war down into Mexico? And where's that?
I don't know anything about that.
There you go. Where, like, as Americans, we should be asking, like, hey,
what's this called? How do you spell it?
Plan Merida, I think, is the Merida Initiative. I think it's one of the programs was called. So basically, the U.S. has been paying for a lot of this drug war. So like, why is it, like, again, if people want to ask questions or want to start probing around, that's one of them. There's a lot of U.S.-based companies that have made a killing off just selling equipment and stuff like that to Mexico. And at the same time, the Mexican government has been doing its best to disarm the local populace, which is an interesting thing. You want to hear something.
The local populace, not the cartels.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, I grew up hunting on a ranch. You can't do that anymore unless you are upper middle class. To get a gun permit, you have to get some money, fly to Mexico City, buy your firearm, get a bunch of documentation to fly it back. Every presidency that comes along, the army gets another bite off that constitutional right that Mexicans have to defend their property with firearms. There's a single federal firearms law in Mexico, which makes it almost unobtainable for anybody that isn't upper middle class or rich to basically own firearms and operate them.
Because it's so expensive to get.
Yeah. And it's every year it gets worse and worse. This new administration passed a shit ton of laws. You can't put a flashlight on your gun to use to defend your home in Mexico.
Why not?
It's illegal.
It's federally put a flashlight on it.
Yeah, it augments its capabilities. So why would a federal government do constitutional amendments to get people from not being armed unless they're getting ready for a fucking revolt?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying, because this doesn't even make sense. Like, obviously we have our gun issues here in America where there's gun violence that happens. It's nothing like in Mexico, where you have hundreds of thousands of people across the country who are employed by these cartels walking around with fucking Uzis.
I've done some irregular shit in my life. And one of the most irregular things that I did, and I'll speak about it here. We were working in a rural part of Mexico, and this old dude comes to the door with a rifle that he shouldn't have, right? Because it's illegal to have that type of rifle that he had. And I took out the magazines, pulled all the bullets out in a bag, and I left it at the fence and left his rifle there. Because he has daughters. And that rifle is there to defend those young daughters that might be taken to a party somewhere, which is a story that I've heard over and fucking over again.
Taken to a party.
Cartel guys showing up to a ranch say, hey, we're going to take some of your daughters to this party. We'll bring them back. They're the guys that have guns. You have nothing because the government says that you shouldn't have a gun because somehow you having a gun fosters organized crime. So the daughters never show up. And that's a story that I've heard many times.
What happens to them?
They're liked, so they keep them. They resist, so they shoot them, which is something we don't... again, sometimes I bring up Netflix and some of these TV series about these criminals and stuff like that. Yeah, I get it. Robin Hood is cool, getting over the government is cool and all that. I get the whole romanticize.
They are the
version.
government.
That's the thing, But also, some of these criminal organizations and criminal cartel members are pedophiles, and something that doesn't get talked about a lot. Some of these,
I haven't heard shit about this.
Well, some of them go into a town and say like, "Hey, I like her and her, but she's 14. Doesn't matter." We don't hear about that, We don't hear about. We're just hearing about some of these mass graves. Why are there women in those mass graves? We just there's Monterey. They found 3 decapitated females.
Decapitated.
Yeah. What's going on there? Are these cartel sicarias? Why are there so many women being murdered in Mexico? Is it just because we have a proliferation of serial killers that are targeting women? Or is it because there's a weird social thing among some criminal organizations where women are being utilized as resources, and once they're done, or just people get away with shit because of the permissive nature of crime that they've fostered across the country, both the government and these cartels?
Yeah. It's maybe I'm making a leap here. I don't think I am, though. You keep talking about the government's convincing the people that they shouldn't be able to have guns because it causes violence, and this causes proliferation of guns in the hands of the people who don't give a fuck about the laws, which is the cartels. But the government who's telling them that is the government that's paid by the cartels or works for them directly. So it's basically the cartels are legislating to make sure people don't have guns.
There you go. You have a political situation in Mexico in this last election cycle where over 30 some candidates were killed that we know of.
Like what kind? Like governor candidates, senators, type
all
deals?
of them,
Okay.
Right? And we have a single ruling party across Mexico, which is the Morena party, which basically took everything in the landslide.
Yeah.
So it's obvious that there is a political effort by criminal organizations or underground organizations to eliminate candidates, right? And okay, so you have this political candidate that won, and they won by a majority. The first thing they do is they go after the Constitution. A bunch of amendments to the Constitution, including this is the big one. All the federal judges and the Supreme Court, the Mexican Supreme Court, basically, and all the judges in Mexico. They say, well, you know what? A lot of these cartel guys are getting off because the legal system is corrupted. So all these judges are letting some of them out, and they're fucking doing this fucking shenanigans. So we need to figure out how to get rid of that, right? So the constitutional amendment they have is now that all judges are going to be popularly elected officials. This is from a country that just fucking lived through basically cartel-funded candidates.
So now the judges are going to be literally cartel funded.
I mean, unless something changes dramatically in Mexico, in the next, this is right. We're
in the middle of it.
There's a guy. There's one guy I'm going to talk to who is a candidate for one of these positions, and I want to kind of get a read on. You're going to make the people in charge of sending somebody away for a long period into an elected official in a country whose political system and class is completely corrupted.
What percentage of it do you think is? What percentage of people in there do you think are corrupt?
I don't know. There's no way of knowing, but A lot of it is. I mean, if we look at it, let's just look at the current federal administration. The internet did a field day by researching and figuring out all the times that the two main lawyers of El Mayo Zambada were with all of the people that are currently in high level positions in the government.
It's just like Reddit threads and stuff.
Like one of them is getting like an award by the federal government in the Senate, like this freedom award of some sort. All these El Mayo Zambada cartel lawyers. So there's whole like series of pictures online that came out, and like their solution now is constitutional amendments to keep people from owning firearms or to make it even harder, and to make judges elected officials. Yeah. And I know that the system is corrupt already. Like the judges there, man, I could tell you some of the fucking cases that I worked in where the fucking judge was completely on that side. But I get it. It's corrupt. All of it is it's like a corrupt institution. But what makes anybody think that it's a good idea to make judges politically elected officials in Mexico with this story and the history, the recent
it's crazy
political history that it's had? And
it's not being talked about here. This is the first I'm hearing about it.
So that's not in the possibility realm. That's happening now. Like there's the first rounds of election of these people that are going to be elected. It's just right across. Yes, it's nearby. Again, I'm going to try to speak to one of them who is going to run for that office. And one of the first questions
you just want to get a read on them.
I just want to get the first question I'm going to ask, like, how do we keep people from getting, And this is the thing. It's not going to be a guy with a fucking cowboy hat and a gold tooth and a gun coming in like, hey, cabron, I want you to be my judge. Here's all this money for your political campaign. Yeah. It's going to be that guy paying, hey, bakery shop, hey, here's some money, give it to this guy. Hey, all you guys here, if you don't vote for this guy, we're going to burn your fucking businesses. That's or, right. I don't know, because this is how they work, I think as we move forward, we're probably going to see an evolution of cartel activities in Mexico. Right now, they're very overt in a lot of places. Again, I was just in Monterrey, and I spoke to some operators that are working all along that area. And they're describing, trying to the Cartel del Noroeste, Northwestern Cartel, which is basically a remnant of the Zetas.
Mm-hmm. Wait, what do you mean it's a remnant?
The original Zetas trained people that then trained other people, and the cartel went away, and then they formed another. So this is like another. That's the latest version of what they are now. And he's speaking about almost 20 vehicles sometimes that they show up around. So this is like an overt cartel. They'll show up in mass. They'll burn trucks and go into like a one-on-one fight with the government. I think we're going to see a shift from that into more of a traditional organized crime type element in Mexico, Talon style. I think Mexico is probably going to criminal organizations in Mexico are probably going to take a page from the.
Set up like a commission.
Yeah, I mean, just like how did the U.S. get rid of the mob?
RICO.
I think the way the U.S. got rid of the mob was inviting them into politics, and I think in a lot of ways that's what I think that in a lot of ways that's what we're going to be seeing in Mexico.
Oh,
tell me I'm wrong. Tell me I'm wrong.
It's figurative rather than totally literal. But
in a lot of ways, they legitimated they became legitimate, but still the sins are there.
Yes,
and I think that's the evolution we're about to see in Mexico.
Here's the thing: like, I'm a long-term optimist in the world, right? When you look at world history, it's never a straight line, but overall, things get better and better and better. Problems that are objectively terrible today were actually 10 times worse 2,000 years ago and stuff. But the weird thing about good and evil, the first weird thing is that for good to exist, evil has to exist, which is a strange thing to accept as your basis. The other weird thing about it, though, is the short term versus the long term. What I mean by that is I believe good wins out in the long term. Over a lot of pain goes through that. In the short term, though, evil has the stakes rigged to be able to win. And here's the example I give. If I have a room filled with 100 people and 99 of them are evil and one of them is good, we're fucked.
Yeah.
Okay? If I have a room filled with 100 people and 99 of them are good and one of them is evil, we might still be fucked.
Yeah.
Because there's something surreptitious and quiet and underhanded and manipulative and cunning about evil that can win. So when I look at, that's why I ask you, like, and it's an impossible question to even answer, so I understand that. But when I ask you, like, what percentage of the Mexican government or military do you think is actually corrupt? Even if it's a number that's lower than the exaggerated number we may think of in our head, let's say the number is actually more like 15%. That's an insanely high number.
Yeah, yeah.
You get 15% of people in a room to secretly, like, I know what you're up to. I know what you're up to. We're fucked.
But I'll stretch the question back up, like forward to you. How many percent? What percentage of the U.S. political class is corrupted? Do you think?
I think it's actually the numbers shockingly similar.
Yeah. So like, Nancy Pelosi's a fucking millionaire.
Oh my God, it's insane. Yeah.
You start like looking at all these political candidates and people that are like, hey, the Democratic Party ad, you're an immigrant. This is who you should be voting for because these are your people. And I'm like, they do remind me of Mexican politicians in a lot of ways. But it's. And I'm not just saying the Democrats. I mean, the Republicans have a lot of people there that I'm
Crenshaw,
so yeah. I'm trying to figure out, like I was speaking to you guys when I was getting here. Like I legit am making an attempt to figure out the U.S. Like I'm new here. I travel around a lot. I talk to everybody. I could sit down with somebody. I've talked to racist. Dudes and fucking I talked to a Grand Dragon once in Fallbrook, California once. Like a Ku Klux
KKK guy.
Yeah, it was a guy that lived in Fallbrook. I don't know if he's still alive. He's like a Grand Dragon guy. He was telling me how like fucking inferior Mexicans were and all that type of shit. But I find it. I don't get offended. Dude,
Soy mexicano. Like you got thick skin.
Soy mexicano y nosotros damos un putre carrilla. Like I'm Mexican, we give ourselves the biggest. Like nothing can hurt us. We give ourselves so much shit, so we're fine. But when I listen to his perspective, I listen to the perspective of somebody working in the Border Patrol. I look at the perspective of a guy wearing like a rainbow hat and telling me how the trans issue is central to the U.S.'s politics, that we should focus on that. And meanwhile, I'm looking at the border in Mexico and fucking kids in fucking hotel rooms in weird parts of the country just fucking being utilized as whatever. So I try and look at the whole issue. And again, I'm a day walker. I'm Mexican born, but I'm legally in the U.S. and I'm trying to figure.
You called that a day walker?
Yeah, a day walker.
A day walker is a ginger without freckles.
A day walker is a vampire that walks in the day. Fucking Blade. Okay. So he's like in the middle. So I try to figure. I'm legit trying to figure out. It's a very complex place to be because I can't come out as a Trump supporter because I'm from Mexico and he's the devil down there, right? He's the orange devil. But I also can't come out as a Claudia Sheinbaum supporter,
right? Because
she was supported by BlackRock. And she has a bunch of money behind her from from some shady places, maybe. And I can't come out in support of that. So like, what do I do? It's quickly dawned on me that a big part of the U.S. is kind of on the same boat in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
Like, which is the less of two evils?
That's it. That's exactly it.
And number one, I think, and this is coming from somebody that has both. Like, dude, I have friends who were veterans who did some wild shit in the world.
Yeah.
But you have to question your country when you have two towers hit by a bunch of Saudis and Egyptian people, and then you bomb the shit out of Iraq and Afghanistan. There's some shit going on there. It's weird. And as far as villainy goes, one of the biggest body dysmorphia things that I've ever seen in the world has the United States seeing themselves as an instrument of change and good in the world. because you've gone through a villain arc in the past few decades that is pretty fucking wild.
Yeah, I think that's fair criticism.
But it's not even criticism. It's like, hey, we did some shit, and we're like, there's a reason why a lot of people in the world hate us, right? And I include myself because people don't give a shit about where I was born. I'm going to be fucking telling the lot with everybody. You see, and I say this because the perspective of a lot of Mexicans when they look at the U.S. is of a villain. Like, you're not the good guys in their life movie. You guys are not G.I. Joe coming in to save them from Cobra. You guys are Cobra in a lot of ways to them. The foreign policy has been an issue for decades and years, especially in South America. It's been not great. Not great. So we have to admit that. Your need for things like drugs and substances is great. Also, your need for sexual exploitation material and people is great. And that's sexual tourism. Figure out where most of these people come from and where most of the pedophiles that get caught with a lot of fucking on their computer are from. And again, that's an aspect of it. The hurtful nature of the U.S.'s foreign policy towards Mexico and how it's vilified a whole segment of the population, and now said that the Mexicans, you go back home. Like, I've had people, I spoke to a guy, a friend of mine, who's in a punk band, the Voodoo Glow Skulls. The Voodoo Glow Skulls, punk band from the 2000s, late 90s. Great dude, American born, but Mexican in origin, but he's American. And people are telling him online that your citizenship is void. You're going to be deported too. Like, there's these weird, wild conversations going on online of that nature, and we're living through it here, in the U.S. But I say all of that with there's no other fucking country that I would rather be in right now to try and fucking put forth my life and the life of my family. Right? Which in my family includes one person.
Hey guys, if you haven't already subscribed, please hit that subscribe button. It's a huge, huge help. Thank you.
See, I knew you were going there that whole time with that. And in my head, I'm wondering, because I like looking at things for what they are. No bullshit, right? Yeah. There's good and bad with everything. And you're calling out the bad. It's hard to hear all that, though. And by the way, I agree with you on a lot of it. And then try to say, yeah, but the good outweighs the bad.
No, I'm not saying the good outweighs the bad, but there are less enemies to my ability to be independent in the way that I live and in my choices and the amount of responsibilities that I've been managed to take here. So I take responsibility for my safety here. I take responsibility for the safety of my home. I have a firearm, I'm a legal firearm owner. I train people how to utilize not only that, but other skills. I empower people through some of the lessons that I provide them from some of the situations that I went through. I have 5 employees. I'm a fucking immigrant, dude. I have 5 employees. There's a lot of freedoms that I'm allowed here that I'm not allowed in other parts of the world. There's less enemies to freedom here than there are in other parts of the world. Mind you, enemies to it. I'm not saying this is the freest place in the world because that's another body dysmorphia thing that the U.S. has where it thinks it's a free country. Go to Tijuana and have a party till 5 a.m. and have the cops show up and give them some money. That's freedom right there. Dangerous freedom, but it's freedom. I understand. If I could ask Americans one thing that I would recommend them do is to travel. Just get out of your fucking bubble and travel somewhere. Yeah, God bless Texas and come here, my guns and all that type of shit. Big game. Go down to fucking Cabo or somewhere. Just fucking walk around, talk to locals. Go down to Hermosillo and Sonora and talk to the locals about what's going on. And none of them are armed. And just be humane and all that. Just fucking talk to people and see their perspectives directly. It's one thing me taking the point of view of the whole of the United States from this orange man on TV. Imagine that, because that's what's happening right now. Mexicans are watching TV, and all of America, all of the United States, is that guy. So imagine the animosity and frustration that a lot of these people are hearing. So on my end, like like when I go down to Mexico, which I do that a lot. And aren't you afraid of going down to Mexico? Yeah, I'm afraid to go to Baltimore too, but I still go, right? There's a perspective thing. I'll go somewhere and I'll talk to the locals. Like, what's going on here? Like, what happened here? I came to New Jersey last night, and the first thing I said, like, where do the locals eat? So I got a few recommendations. And then I was walking across the street and I saw a big mattress on the side of the road and a lot of graffiti and a bunch of cars parked on the fucking sidewalk, and I couldn't walk on the sidewalk. And I found it hilarious because I'm like, holy shit, this is Mexico. so I did a video. So I did a small video like, where am I, in Tijuana or in New Jersey? Right? What I'm saying is we're more similar than we want to admit. We have ties that go culturally, blood, economic, and a lot of this. And then I realize the humanity behind all of this. Again, just like some of the enemies that I face who are now friends of mine, and kids hang out together and shit like that. There was definitely an effort being made by powers that aren't too clear to me, that are fostering an animosity between both of our countries, a political animosity. There's certain powers that be on both sides of the border that are fostering and fostered for years, and this past administration is a clear sign of that.
All right, guys, that takes us to the end of part 1 of my 2-part sit-down with Ed Calderon. The next episode will be out on the Tuesday after this, so this is dropping on a Friday. I'll see you in a few days. Enjoy the weekend. If you haven't already subscribed, please hit that subscribe button as well as that like button on the video. It's a huge help, and see you on Tuesday.